apologies. No apologies have been received unless somebody has them. No. Nothing else. Agenda item number 2, declaration of interest, just as we're recommencing after recess to refresh people's memories. Under Standing Order 69.4, before taking part in any proceedings of the Assembly or its committees, a member must declare any interest, financial or otherwise, which is relevant to the debate or proceedings, where such interest is held by the member or an immediate relative. As this is the first meeting following Easter recess, a timely point to remind committee members to declare any interest held by them which are relevant to the work of the committee. So I have to ask, does any member have any interest to declare? No? No. That's grand. Okay. Now, draft minutes. Copy the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of March 2015 is at page 6. So if members are content with the accuracy and detail. Agreed? Great. Agenda item number 4, chairperson's business. Now, before we just go into the other formal stuff that we have here around the chairperson's business, what I would like to do is just place on record to the committee staff who were involved in the arranging of our committee visit to Stuttgart our sincere thanks. Everything went very, very smoothly, and to all the staff that were involved in making the arrangements, a big, big thank you. The trip went exceedingly well, and I think we'll have a report of the full details of it next week. The only thing on reflection we could probably learn from, we could certainly do without the input that we had from the office of the NI executive in Brussels. I really think we could have done without it, you know. So that's all I'll say about that matter. So on that, I look forward to the report and to yes, William, do you want to comment?
Yes, Chairman, I just want to echo what you've said, and I found it very beneficial. I mean, it's tremendous in terms of how the government there, and the city government and the regional government run the economy in particular, but the city in its entirety. I do think, though, in terms of the European executive office in Brussels, there is merit in terms of asking them for a report on how they saw from their perspective what the benefits were in relation to it, and also in terms of taking things forward. Obviously, there are contacts there, particularly with Dr. Nicola, who we met.
Yes.
And I think that we should be looking to see how Brian Smart and his colleagues are able to take forward. Because if there was talk when we were there of a return reciprocal visit to Northern Ireland, and I think they will obviously be, excuse me, if there is to be a return visit, I think they would be key in seeing how that can be worked from our perspective here. Yeah. It shouldn't just be, and obviously that's their job. It shouldn't be just responsibility of the staff in the committee office here.
Just by way of information, that contact wasn't really established through the office of the Northern Ireland Executive in Brussels. Whenever we were out previously, I had met her and picked up the details. So that's, and Jim had made direct contact there. Right, okay. So on foot of that, so that's how that had happened. Right. And that's how things fell in place subsequent to that. Herself and her colleagues were very helpful when we were out there previously. So.
But I think she said she's a regular visitor to Brussels, and I think it would be important that they
have a delegation place in Brussels.
Yeah, and if the Northern Ireland Office Bureau office in Brussels could follow up on that, I think it would be useful.
Yes. Okay, thanks, William, and thanks just to yourself and indeed Paul, for making it a really collaborative visit. Got a lot of good from it. So, next item is Northern Ireland Commonwealth Games Council. Members had agreed to hold an informal meeting with the Northern Ireland Commonwealth Games Council to discuss its bid to host the Commonwealth Youth Games in 2021. A meeting has been arranged for Monday the 27th at 3:30 p.m. So anyone wanting to attend that, just contact the committee office, please. Okay. Consumer Council 30-year celebration. to inform members that table today is an invitation from the Consumer Council inviting myself to participate. This is at page 3 of table papers, unless members have any comments that they're content to note. DETI press releases are currently forwarded to all members by the committee office. Any member who prefers not to receive the press release should inform the committee office in order to be taken off the distribution list. Okay. Now, then, just by way of information, cancellation of the SIGA healthcare visit. The visit to SIGA healthcare has been cancelled due to members' availability. Obviously, we're pressurised through the elections and the likes at the moment. So, okay. Now, agenda item number 5 is the oral briefing from the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce inquiry into economic growth and job creation in a reduced tax environment. The clerk's brief is at page 17, and the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce briefing paper is at page 19. And briefing the committee today from the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce are, here we come, Evan. So, with us here today, good morning to you, are Mr. Kevin Kingston, President of the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Stephen McCulley, Vice President, Ms. Anne McGregor, Chief Executive, and also with us here today, Ms. Maureen O'Reilly, who's an independent economist. So you're very welcome indeed. It's good to see you again, Kevin. Or should I address you as Mr. President?
No, not that formal.
So, thanks very much indeed for contributing for making your paper available to us. A very important issue, and hopefully the ducks will eventually all line up in a row for us to deliver on this. You're aware of the format, and you've been here before. The opportunity, floors yourselves to make your opening statement, and then we'll have a Q&A session from members. Okay, so
Thank you, Chair.
Please continue.
Yep. Well, look, first of all, can I just say good morning and thank you for this opportunity to meet with the committee today. We really do value these opportunities to engage directly with our representatives here in Stormont. I'm joined this morning by Anne McGregor, who is the Chief Executive of the Chamber, Maureen O'Reilly, the Chamber's economist, and Stephen McCulley, who is Vice President of the Northern Ireland Chamber. I trust, ladies and gentlemen, the Chamber is an organisation you know reasonably well at this stage. We're the largest independent business network in Northern Ireland. We exist to help our members grow, both locally and internationally, and to help drive the development of the economy. We represent 1,200 members across Northern Ireland, employing about 100,000 people. Turning to the subject of the inquiry this morning, I hope you've all received a copy of our document. And with your permission, what we'd like to do is really just summarise that before we move to questions. First thing, the first point we make in this document is that we warmly welcome the progress that we have made on corporation tax in recent months. And we believe this is a major opportunity to drive economic growth in Northern Ireland. For us, corporation tax devolution is about jobs. It is about creating opportunities on the ground, creating changed communities. In our briefing document, we focus on what we believe are the actions needed to maximise this opportunity. And the first point we make is the importance of political stability. This is a crucial factor which has a huge impact on business confidence, and ultimately business confidence is a key ingredient for driving investment, growth and jobs. We then also highlight the need to urgently resolve the date and rate issue. Business needs clarity in terms of what rate will be applied and when it will be available, so that business can begin the process of planning for investment and growth. We highlight 5 areas which we believe are crucial to building the right foundation for growth post-corporation tax devolution: skills, competitiveness, exports, infrastructure and supporting investment. I'm going to ask Anne to comment on skills and infrastructure, Stephen will look at competitiveness, Maureen will comment on exports, and I'll finish briefly on supporting investment. So, Anne.
Thank you, Committee. First of all, I want to talk about the development of the skills and ambitions of our people and preparing young people for the world of work, investing in the skills of those already in work and improving the employability of those not in work, particularly economically inactive, is really important for Northern Ireland's competitiveness. Businesses can only perform as well as the people who start and work and run them. And skills shortages is consistently raised as one of the biggest issues facing our members. There is quite a lot of data and good research available there, but one of the figures is that Northern Ireland is ranked 20th out of 26 countries in skills ranking, behind the UK and Ireland, and this has remained unchanged for the last decade. The supply of skills is not well aligned to labour market needs, and there's a brain drain factor, and recruiting international workers can be a challenge because of issues with visas. Members such as Wrightbus have shortages of engineers. Companies like CME, Concentrix, Allstate are short of software specialists and technicians. Moy Park and Dumbia and others are short of food technologists, R&D staff. It's a feeling across the board. But we also have a higher share of working age population with low qualifications and low literacy and numeracy. And many young people aren't really equipped for the world of work. The shortage of graduates across a number of key areas, including management, software development, ICT and STEM. And there's pressure there already, and there will be additional pressure as the reduction of corporation tax comes in. We believe there will be a higher requirement for higher level skills around creative arts, managerial and professional roles, and computer science, as well as management and leadership. We would make a number of recommendations. First of all, I think we noted it hadn't changed significantly for 10 years, and there is a plan to develop a skills barometer, and I would encourage the committee to make sure that barometer is set in place and that there's strong targets set for reskilling. In terms of funding, we consider prioritising investment in FE and HE is really important. Both HE and FE are facing cuts, sometimes between 15% for HE and 12% for FE, which will reduce a drastic number of courses available courses available or the numbers of students that they can take on. There needs to be actions to increase the inflow of high-skilled and experienced migrant workers in diaspora. We also need to upskill of the low-skilled and improve that whole basic literacy and numeracy. So we're suggesting prioritising budget around these areas. But upskill in the existing workforce will be particularly important as well. And actions to encourage businesses to invest are important, particularly in R&D. Also, the supply chain opportunities will emerge, and also for export expertise, international sales experience. Those are immediate short-term actions we'd recommend. In the longer term, the support for year 2 of any apprentice scheme that's launched this year. We'd love to see the career, get access to the 2014 careers review. And that whole preparation for the world of work, whether it's enterprise modules for HE and FE or business governor, all are very important for the young people of Northern Ireland. So that's our skills piece. In terms of the infrastructure, a world-class economy needs world-class infrastructure to support economic growth, and businesses need certainty that crucial improvements will be delivered in terms of transport, energy, telecoms and premises, we believe. Again, after skills, infrastructure is the second biggest area that we get feedback from our members on through our quarterly. We've interacted with our members through our quarterly economic survey, through various pieces of research that we can tell you a bit more about. But there's a number of issues for us there. Failure to invest in the capacity and maintenance of key routes like the Westlink, the sort of connection, the A5 dual into Londonderry and Auchnacoy. There's also issues around, we have really good broadband coverage, and there's been an excellent programme of rural broadband, but to see uptake there, and there's still issues around mobile connections. So in the short term, there's also issues around sort of office space. In the short term, we would be prioritising the Grade A office space and industrial space, and that's likely to intensify. Organisations like the Port and Harbour have developed some good activity, and that would be should be encouraged. York Street interchange really needs to go as fast as it can now. Literally needs to go as fast as it can. I know we're likely to be an inquiry. Investment in the public transport services to enhance connectivity and mobility, particularly the Dublin rail link, for example, is still an issue. We also support the further, rollout of the broadband. As I said, there is access to high speed. 93% of the time we have good access, but when you get into 3G and 4G, that still goes down to 28.5% of the time. So there's still work to be done in that area. In the long term, then, we think there's aviation capacity issues. Also, world-class digital infrastructure like 5G, and then we think there's we should be looking at funding techniques to fund investments, a bit like the Scottish Futures model. Okay, sorry, it took a little bit longer.
Okay, I would like to speak briefly to page 7 of the Chamber's submission. This set of actions focuses on the importance of strengthening competitiveness in Northern Ireland through short and long-term actions, particularly regarding the cost of doing business. There's no doubt that a more competitive Northern Ireland will attract more investment and jobs, and local businesses will be able to compete more successfully both nationally and internationally. The Economic Advisory Group's report on competitiveness in Northern Ireland just back in June 2013 concluded that Northern Ireland was 42nd within a group of 145 countries in the comparison. The report highlighted a number of weaknesses such as access to finance and tax rates, where good progress, as Kevin has said, has been made, and in the fullness of time this will enable Northern Ireland to climb the league table. In addition to these points, our members are telling us they are concerned about business rates, specifically regarding the future for industrial derating, the cost of energy, particularly for more intensive electricity users in our economy, and the cost of compliance of new regulations or red tape that arises as various legislation gets transposed and applied locally. So our recommended actions in the short term in respect of improving competitiveness include taking the next important steps in setting a rate and date as Kevin has already mentioned. There are important actions in respect of addressing the security of electricity supply in Northern Ireland through strengthening interconnection, and also improving the electricity price alignment of all businesses relative to an EU average. We would also want to see a freeze in business rates, including the industrial derating arrangement through to 2017. An active consideration should be given to the outworking of the recommendations of the DETI review of regulation and red tape. For example, the appointment of a regulation business champion. In respect of the longer-term actions, we believe that there should be a more integrated plan for electricity network development, particularly in respect to facilitating business growth in a timely way. Also work with Brussels and Westminster in respect of stemming the flow of changes in rules and regulation that impacts business without delivering value to customers or consumers nationally and internationally. And finally, we believe active consideration should be given to further enterprise zones, like the new pilot enterprise zone in Coleraine, with rates relief, capital allowances, simplified planning, and world-class infrastructure. So that's my brief summary. I'm going to pass on to Maureen.
Maureen's just going to comment on exports.
Thank you, yes. So the Chamber's third action, as you can see on page 8, focuses on the need to support Indigenous business growth, but particularly on growing Northern Ireland's trade potential, both nationally, because it is an issue even selling to GB, and internationally. It's a particularly important issue for Northern Ireland and for the Chamber, because the starting point is that we have such a small economy and we need to look outside it very quickly to grow. It's interesting because every quarter with the Quarterly Economic Survey, competitiveness is a much bigger issue for Northern Ireland businesses than it is for the wider UK businesses who respond. Obviously it means more and better jobs, and obviously productivity as well, improvements, and even attractiveness in terms of FDI. There's so many pluses to try and encourage the businesses to here to export. The difficulty is that we have this very small business and export base. We're smallest of the UK regions in terms of what we produce, and obviously that's because we have only 120,000 businesses here. Scale's a particular issue. We don't have very many large businesses, 250 plus businesses, or in terms of what they employ compared to the UK average. A very small export base as well. For example, we've got less than 1,600 goods exporters, which is one of the measures that we've used. And again, that's the smallest number across the UK regions. And I'm sure you're all aware of the statistic on how dependent we are on a few large exporters. 10 firms account for half of the manufacturing exports here. So that's how dependent we are on a small number of large firms. Very hard hit in terms of the recession here, both the business and export base, and obviously the export base suffered particularly because of the fact that we do rely so heavily on sales to the Republic of Ireland, and a lot of that, in the build-up to the recession was, manufacturing businesses linked in with the construction sector down south. So it's a big fallout there. I mean, for example, between 2008 and 2009, we actually lost a fifth of the value of our exports just in that 1 year alone. And also in terms of the numbers of new businesses that have been coming on stream, those have been falling as well. A particular issue just at the moment as well, which we had spoken about, was exchange rates, which aren't helping our exporters either. And again, this latest Quarterly Economic Survey, which is just published next week, that comes across again quite strongly. And that's also an issue obviously for the wider UK economy too. The Chamber held a conference called Growing Something Brilliantly last May, which some of you may have been at, and we asked businesses, it was very high attendance, we asked the businesses what were the issues for them as potential existing exporters. We did a couple of hundred responses, equally split between the two, and as you can see from the document, some different issues and some issues in common between potential and existing exporters, finance in common between the two, but particularly for potential exporters, just finding and understanding what new customers might mean for them. The Chamber's particular focus on trying to identify potential exporters and work with them. There's fixed cost to market entry. That's a big issue for exporters, and it's how to help potential exporters to get through that. There are positives to build on after all of that, and that's the fact that we do have a very strong manufacturing sector, and there's resilience in there obviously as well in terms of the businesses that have worked through the recession. We are the only region of the UK with a land border with the EU as well, which does work to our advantage, and you can see that in terms of sales to the south. I know just even doing a piece of work around the border region, businesses there trade naturally. It's second nature to them to trade with the south, and that's something to actually try and work on and move into, up the scale. So in terms of recommendations, from the short-term perspective, I think it's critical. The Chamber believes it's critical that very accessible continuous support is there for the whole business life cycle. That's from start-up to growth and to export. Again, that particular focus on potential exporters and also on access to finance. There is an export action plan in development at the moment, and that's something, again, that the Chamber is very supportive of. But the key to that really is that it is focused on businesses, not on types of support, but how the businesses actually access that support. And that's really important. It needs to be streamlined, visible and effective for it to work. A particular issue, just slightly allied to that, has been raised by members around procurement. Again, this is an issue that comes up quite regularly, and basically how SMEs participate in the whole procurement process. It should be easier for consortia, for example, to compete for larger public sector contracts by removing some of the hurdles that exist there for small businesses to actually get together and do that. just even from experience, the whole procurement issue is so resource intensive, and those costs really do bear particularly heavy in small businesses, you know, even compared to large. In terms of longer term objectives, the Chamber would like to see its budget for export support to be increased, because it really basically believes it's essential to economic progress here. And then an issue again which you'll be aware of that the Chamber has been very much involved with is the easy access and affordable air connections to international markets. That should be part of the longer term plan, although that's obviously an issue which I know has been addressed in quite detail over recent months. So that just gives you a flavour of the kind of issues and asks around Indigenous business growth and exports.
Chair, if I could just finish with the points around, very briefly, around encouraging investment. Ultimately, the committee will be aware that investment is what drives growth. That's what creates the jobs at the end of the day. Our sense from members, and certainly the messages we're getting from the QES, is that business confidence is not yet fully recovered. While consumer confidence is at a 7-year high, businesses are still relatively cautious in outlook. The points we make in our report are the need to improve business financial literacy, helping businesses broaden the range of financing options that they use to make sure they have the right foundation for growth. We talk about planning structures. We are suggesting that we introduce a set of KPIs for decision making to help speed up the investment process. We ask that we should Northern Ireland proof UK finance interventions to make sure that all such support targets real areas of need and specific issues in Northern Ireland. And we also believe there are opportunities to help business manage cash flow through better emphasis on prompt payment, the use of electronic settlement, and we'd encourage continued education around the whole R&D tax credits piece as a useful tool for driving R&D investment. So, Chair, that's a summary of our document. Very happy to take questions.
Thanks very much, Kevin. And you were taking me into the area. There's a couple of issues I want to come back on. But the KPIs for decision making, obviously we've got sort of, if you like, a patchwork quilt of what the issues were there today, and we touched upon infrastructure, we touched upon R&D, we touched upon broadband, we touched upon mobile communications, we touched upon, if you like, the whole plethora of issues. And clearly investment is a key issue, but just as much as anything else, the investment and how you make that investment and the strategic delivery of it is important. And we've just been out there a couple of weeks back in Stuttgart to see how basically the Germans do things. And it certainly is a bit of an eye-opener. And a key part of that is planning and strategically driven. So what suggestions would you have, if you like? We can all do things better individually and collectively, but more important, the political collective, the executive and the assembly. What suggestions would you have as to how to just put this all together, integrate strategies and policies in regard to where we move the economy and how we move that economy forward? Because, if you like, you have the tendency of that being in that silo, this bit being in this silo, and we want to make sure that that whole joined-up concept is realised. It's often talked about, but is realised for the betterment of the community. So, have you any particular suggestions based on your own experienced wisdom?
The first thing I would say, Chair, is the importance of the entire executive agreeing that the economy needs to be at the heart of Programme for Government. That is, if there is that real commitment there, that I think guides and steers much of the thinking of government. We believe very passionately that the economy has the potential, growth in the economy has the potential to address many of the issues in Northern Ireland. We talked earlier about corporation tax for us being about jobs. It is not simply about growing business. Why do we grow business? We grow business because that creates opportunities for people on the ground. That has the opportunity to change communities, to make a real difference for the electorate across Northern Ireland. That reaches into areas like education, and underprivileged, some of the social challenges we face in Northern Ireland. So the first thing for us is the economy has to be at the centre of the programme for government. But that is with the acknowledgement that the reason for that is that we are changing Northern Ireland for the better for all of us by doing that.
Have you specific suggestions as to how it could be done better to integrate that patchwork quilt?
From our paper today, you'll have seen there are, if we take the subject of driving the economy, corporation tax in particular, there needs to be a joined-up approach in terms of maximising that opportunity, and I guess that's fundamentally what we're calling for in this document. So much of what the challenges that we face in a context of cutbacks, in the context of austerity, is real, it's tangible, but at the same time we need to be thinking about how do we allocate resources so that we make the most of the opportunity in front of us. And you take a subject like skills as an obvious area in that. How do we, in a context, yes, where resources are tighter, where money is, where we're working to tighter budgets, how do we at the same time still prioritise whatever resources we have to make sure that we drive the right skills to encourage economic growth, to deliver jobs on the ground and opportunities for all of our people in Northern Ireland.
Okay, thanks. And Maureen, then, as you were talking, and geographically I know where your roots are, and that probably influenced what you said about business and doing it with the rest of the island across the border and such. But it did take me into an area that is been discussed quite a bit over in England as part of the elections, and that is if we were to have, to my mind, the crazy situation of withdrawal from Europe. Do you have a collective view as a chamber on that, and just where that would position us? I know where I'm coming from personally and politically as a party, but just in terms of its implications for the North.
Yeah, I'll maybe take that one, Chair, if you'll allow me. Very clearly, we believe that membership of the EU is critical for business going forward. We believe Northern Ireland is particularly exposed to changes. Any changes in this area, it goes to issues of business confidence. It impacts indeed on issues like corporation tax. I know I had the opportunity to travel to Washington over St. Patrick's Day and talk with not just the Invest NI team out there in the States, but also with some American business representatives. And I know just how important that whole issue of access to the EU is for their planning purposes. And I think any uncertainty around that will only set back the good work that Invest NI are trying to do at the moment in publicising the opportunities that corporation tax now offers us. So I think the resounding message from us and from our members would be that membership of the EU is the right thing for us as a region.
Okay, thanks very much. That's
Could I just say, it's
Maureen.
actually something that we did that's been asked in the latest quarterly survey. It's not published until next week, and it's something that's been asked in a wider UK context. But as Kevin suggests, about 2 and 3 members believe that the UK should remain part of the
2 and
EU.
3. Okay.
Right, okay.
There's more detail on that, and it will be available next week if you.
Right, when's that going to be available? Just Maureen, just by
Next
way of.
week, the-
It's we launch it Monday morning, but
All right.
we'll have the data I can give you on Friday if you wish.
Oh, good. That'd be very
It's
interesting.
an update every quarter, Chair, but Monday's update, there's an update on Monday for the most recent survey.
That'd be particularly interesting. Thank you for that. Mr. Dunn, Gordon.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you very much, panel, for coming in today. And I think we have enjoyed your presentation so far, and I think we all share your concerns, and we recognise your enthusiasm for business. One of the issues, Stephen, that you mentioned was about the pilot enterprise zone in Northern Ireland. How do you see that working, and what sort of advantages do you think it would bring to trying to create
Maureen's happy to take that one, Stephen.
small businesses?
Yeah, well, I think it is useful just to go back to the original question about how you bring all the components of all the drivers together. An enterprise zone is an ideal opportunity to focus chosen sectoral themes, the skills agenda, getting the right type of infrastructure, getting the right type of startup incentives, capital allowances, that keeps the cost of capital as low as possible. So I think enterprise zones are ideal to put all the various strands of economic development together. And they can work in different forms. I think there are 24 successful enterprise zones in GB, and they follow different themes and have different design characteristics. And it's really all about spotting where the best opportunities are for economic development and develop the enterprise opportunity around that.
Okay, would you like to come in on that issue?
Just to say exactly what Susan said, I mean, it struck me from looking at the enterprise zones was how different. We had a chat about this, about how different they all were in terms of how they went about things, and it might be too early to say about how effective they are, but it would be useful, I think, to look at the content of the different approaches to the enterprise zones in GB, and even to see where the lessons learnt are in terms of what's worked well for them. Because the kind of issues that they have addressed are the issues that come up on a very, very regular basis in terms of the members around weights and capital allowances, etc.
And I think that flexibility could be an important attribute for helping tackle some of the specific Northern Ireland issues.
Do you think that there's something there that Invest NI at the moment are not addressing? Do you think there could be opportunities here through the enterprise zones that are not at the moment being tackled?
It's an entirely different thing, in fairness to, I think, to what Invest NI's objectives are.
Yeah, I think it would need to be led by the executive in terms of those changes, rather than Invest NI. But I'm sure Invest would be
part of it.
Would be well able to sell that globally if there was such an opportunity.
Okay, just moving on. Energy costs obviously are something we have debated extensively here, and Stephen, I'm sure you could come in on that with your experience on NIE. And what is NIE doing to try and manage costs especially for businesses?
I'm here on behalf of the Chamber.
Yeah,
I'll maybe swap hats just for a brief moment with Power NI. But a reliable and affordable energy supply is vitally important for any economy. Northern Ireland doesn't have any indigenous sources of fuel. Its remoteness and lack of scale are disadvantages in the context of delivering a secure and affordable electricity or energy supply generally. But I think the regulator's last price comparison confirmed that for the vast majority of customers in Northern Ireland, that's domestic, SMEs, etc., the price that is paid is in and around the European average, and that's probably not a bad place to be. I accept that for more intensive users, and I know you've heard from Manufacturing NI, that their prices for higher users would be out of kilter with that. So they would be at the higher end of the European continuum. Work was undertaken by the regulator last year to identify the reason behind that. It's an allocation issue, particularly around infrastructure, network costs and levies. And it's interesting that the regulator published last week a consultation on addressing one aspect of that, and that's the raising of the funds for the energy efficiency programme. And that's now the recommendation is that should be now slanted more in favour of larger businesses. So that's one step down the road of addressing this allocation issue for the more intensive electricity users.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you. Mr. Humphrey, William.
Thanks, Chairman. Thank you very much for your presentation. Can I just ask, at the outset of the presentation, you talked about progress in terms of corporation tax being important, and you welcomed that progress, but you will appreciate that we're not actually there.
Yes.
If we fail to get corporation tax, in the Chamber's view, how damaging will that be to Northern Ireland's economy, and what is the opportunity cost of it?
Yes, well, I'll speak both personally and as President of the Chamber on this. From my personal perspective, I've been in business in Northern Ireland for a couple of decades, if not more at this stage. I have seen so many different initiatives over the course of that period in terms of trying to rebalance the private sector and addressing the scale of the public sector we have in Northern Ireland. We have specific issues, legacy issues, which we are also tackling at the same time, as well as dealing with an increasing globalised world economy and the challenges there. For me, I believe corporation tax is the opportunity to change that pattern. It is an opportunity to drive growth by encouraging business investment. In terms of, the numbers are well documented. We are talking about an extra 30 to 40,000 jobs, and that's, as I say, I keep coming back to this point, but for us, corporation tax is about changing communities. It is about creating jobs and opportunities for our people, and if we can do that, we change Northern Ireland. So the scale of the job opportunities that is in front of us with corporation tax is, in my view, the biggest opportunity we have. It would be beyond a sin to waste that opportunity. It is too big to let it slip through our fingers.
Can I ask you then, Kevin, you personally as President or the Chamber collectively, have you been making those views known to political parties?
Yes, we have. We've made our views known to, I think, everybody around the executive table. As I say, we believe it is crucial to the future. While we have had significant progress in terms of the devolution or the power of devolution, yes, I take the point. There is still work to be done in terms of actually delivering it on the ground, and that for us goes back to the points we've made about rate and date. About political stability and about certainty to allow business to get on with the process of planning, investing and creating jobs.
Okay. Can I turn then to business tax rates? In terms of the... I was contacted by a businessman, a city centre-based businessman at the weekend, who will now have a rates bill of £76,000. Can I ask you, in terms of, you have put forward some ideas on how this could be changed, whilst at the same time providing adequate funding for local government to take things forward. What is the Chamber's view around that issue?
I think the key focus is in around the competitiveness of the region and trying to iron out any regional disadvantages with respect to business tax. There's been a lot of change recently with the revaluation process. I think there's an opportunity the year that lies ahead to take stock and to look at the best rating systems going forward to properly incentivise business. Manufacturing has the 30% D-rating cap, which is very, very important to them. Enterprise zones have already been mentioned. There's a business rate break in that concept as well. But I think collectively we have to ensure that the business rating system is designed to deliver the right strategic outcome, both for the economy and socially for Northern Ireland as a whole.
And you've met the Finance Minister and I presume you've also met with NILGA on these issues? Yeah.
Yes.
And what was can I ask what the outcome of those conversations was?
There are always going to be tensions and prioritisation around how those decisions are made. For us as a chamber, we believe the priority needs to be on driving economic growth, in particular. What parts of the economy will drive the greatest job creation, will create the greatest economic benefit for all of us across Northern Ireland. So we welcome the progress that has been made in terms of the recent revaluation, except there are still some challenges and anomalies for individuals which need to be worked through, particularly for certain sectors. But the bigger issue for us is what can be done in that entire space around making sure Northern Ireland is competitive as possible to drive growth.
Oh, can I ask, you mentioned, I think, part of the presentation about the shortage of skills. You mentioned Wrightbus and the shortage of engineers and Waypark food technologists, and also the general shortage in terms of IT skills. And I mean, I absolutely agree there needs to be a joined-upness in terms of the Northern Ireland economy, both with regional government and local government as well. But also there, I think, given the issue you raised, there obviously needs to be a very clear joined-upness between DETI and DEL, the regional colleges and indeed schools in terms of career choices for young people. Has the Chamber been active or proactive around that issue?
Have we been proactive around that issue?
Yeah.
We, through our quarterly economic survey, we always get information on the skills, and we do bring that information to the attention of both DEL and DETI. We welcome actually the formation of possibly the Department of the Economy, which means then that there will be more interaction. So we're from a policy viewpoint, we're bringing that message always to DETI and to DEL. So yes, I can say we are. And we responded to the budget review. We always give examples of what the issues are for business. And that's why we would be lobbying really for university funding and FE funding to be looked at, because they have really strong connections to business. In terms of we are a bit concerned about literacy and numeracy, and possibly there could be more interaction between DE and DEL, for example. Is that okay?
Chairman, have a time for one more? Or is it?
Just quickie. Yep.
Okay. You mentioned the transportation infrastructure and projects that need to be progressed. Can you expand on that?
Sorry?
The
Transportation. Again, we are bringing the views of our members up here, and for businesses, getting your product to the harbour, to the airports or whatever, you know, there's areas of the roads that aren't optimal, and that's well rehearsed. I mean, there's 100,000 cars a day and many more lorries using between the link between the M2 and the M3. So that whole piece in Yorkgate is it slows things down. Also, if you're a business based out of, in the regions, very areas around Toom slow you down going up to whether you're going to Derry, etc. And then between Derry and the Auchnacloy. So road infrastructure is really, really important to get your goods to market. So our members repeatedly say that.
Okay, but are there specific, outside of those two, you welcome the progress of the Larne?
Yes,
package?
excellent. You know, the Julie, I understand that'll be open shortly, so that'll improve that infrastructure there, obviously. More of that, it would be useful. Be a nice one around too, wouldn't it?
Thanks, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, William. Mr. Flanagan, Phil.
Thanks, Patsy, and thanks for your presentation. Region had a very positive and useful engagement with the Chamber, and hope that continues. The first thing you've said, and the first thing in your presentation, is that the Chamber believes we need a stable political environment. Can you elaborate on that a bit, Kevin? What that actually means?
For us, the issue of political stability goes to business confidence. So it's about businesses having the confidence that they can plan for the future and have a broad understanding of what the parameters will be that they will be making, in which they will be making that investment. But the current example of obviously corporation tax, that goes to the rate and take point. For us, businesses would be are calling to know what that rate will be and when it will be introduced. That ties into the whole point around political stability, which in turn drives confidence. Should I make an investment? Should I plan out 3 years for a new factory on the back of the money that I will save from corporation tax? I'd be able to apply that back into a new factory, perhaps, or not. and people need that. People need that confidence. People need that visibility, because investment decisions are generally, significant investment decisions are generally a 3 to 5 year time period.
And what about the threatened referendum on EU membership? How is that impacting on business confidence and political stability?
I think it probably hasn't, it's something that I think businesses are starting to think about, which is why the Chamber decided to ask about it, or even the British Chamber actually decided to ask about it this quarter. At the top of my head, I think, say that the members are calling to stay as part of the EU, and that's part of I think the EU issue is maybe just that wee bit removed in terms of how it impacts on businesses at the moment, as opposed to something like the corporation tax issue, which does have an impact on investment decisions.
And I think once we get through May, and the issue really comes to the fore, it's going to become a much bigger issue. I think perhaps in Northern Ireland, we've been very much focused around some of the immediate challenges that we face and the corporation tax debate, which perhaps has led to the EU issue not being in the same focus that it should have been. But I think in a couple of months it will really be coming to the fore, Phil.
Well, I think it's a bigger issue between now and May than after, maybe, because the way people vote between now and May will determine whether there's a referendum or not. One of the issues we've looked at here is in terms of addressing regional imbalance, and it was a programme for government commitment from 2011 to 2015. Have you done any work in how we collectively can attract greater levels of investment into rural areas and encourage businesses to locate and invest in rural communities?
Yeah, I think much of what we have talked about in this document goes to that point, Phil, in terms of creating the foundation for growth across all of Northern Ireland and not simply in Belfast. And so issues such as infrastructure go to connectivity, go to broadband access outside Belfast. The skills piece goes to availability of the right skills in the Northwest, in Fermanagh. Those are fundamental points.
I see what you're saying, but you're kind of talking about a rising tide lifting all boats, and it's not really the way that the world actually works. Because if you take my own area of Fermanagh in 2013-14, Invest and I actually only brought 3 companies to consider investing in the county, and that was despite there being £92 million spent hosting the G8 that year. So, a rising tide didn't lift the boats in Fermanagh, let alone everywhere that year. So, would there be any measures you would consider supporting in terms of addressing that regional imbalance, as opposed to just a blanket overall approach to improve the overall situation?
The creating the right environment is fundamental for all parts of Northern Ireland. But I think the other initiative that we have touched on this morning that might be of particular relevance in that context would be enterprising. That creates an opportunity for particular incentives in a particular area, the opportunity to create clusters from particular industries, and those sort of specific initiatives could target investment at a particular geographic area.
Also, that whole Indigenous business growth, it's really important that we do have a continuous support across Northern Ireland, so any business going into any area will get the same support. At the minute, we have a start-up programme, and then you have access to an Invest NI suite of products and services. But if you're a middle business that's not quite big or not quite, not start-up, there's a plethora of, it's confused, the support there, and we still believe there needs to be some sort of Northern Ireland-wide business development programme to help some of those Indigenous businesses to grow. And there's some, there are some really good businesses out around the country across the sector that need to grow, and helping them to recruit, 10 more people or 20 more people would be very, very helpful across rural areas.
One of the historical criticisms that existed about Invest NI was that they were only interested in foreign investment. But I think in the last number of years, I've seen a sea change in that, and that's been reflected to me through business owners across the north. But I still think there is a gap between the start-up businesses and businesses that then move to export and the people in between. And there have been a number of pilot programmes set up through Invest NI with Fermanagh District Council in terms of the Survive and Thrive programme and Grow and Prosper, and they're very useful and successful, and I think they're something that need to be considered in other areas and been done right across the north. But in terms of how Invest and I operate and how we set targets for them, they're usually given a 4-year target, which is then broken down into 4 financial years. Would you support or consider supporting sub-regional targets being set for Invest and I in terms of creating jobs in specific sub-regional areas and the level of investment they should attract into it?
I think that would be, it'd be quite challenging because employers and investors make choices about where they want to be according to where the staff are, the communication is. Then you have indigenous businesses, and so, I mean, if someone set me a target for creating businesses in Tyrone with all those great engineering firms and growth, that would be something that is achievable. But there are, you have to face it, there are rural areas that have very low business base, so, you know, setting a target for each county and each region would be hard. Maybe there's something.
But the target doesn't need to be the same. If an area has a low business base, their target can be fairly low.
And I guess that's the crucial point, Phil, is how the targets are set and in what context. We wouldn't want to drive wrong business decisions, but at the same time, obviously, we want to make sure that all of Northern Ireland benefits from economic growth. So, I guess an awful lot of what you're suggesting does come down to how those targets are set.
Yeah.
The detail that they go into for each geographic area and the parameters around what Invest NI would actually have to work to.
Obviously, our councils have a major role to play in that regard, and they will have local targets. They will be more interested directly in the local area.
The final point I want to make is on the cost of doing business, and you've mentioned industrial derating on a number of occasions. And I just want to say, as far as I'm concerned, it's not something that's on the table. I haven't heard anybody mentioning changing the current policy, so I wouldn't be getting too exercised, and I wouldn't remind people that policy exists if I was
Is
you.
the hair?
That's reassuring.
Just, that's reminded me of something I was going to ask about. The review of business rates. We were told that there would be winners and losers on that. Have you done any, I know we're probably picking up on the losers. Have you done any sort of research among your membership to find out how that's...
Unfortunately, we haven't, but we could do it quite easily for you.
It'd be very helpful if you could, just as I say.
We can ask that at the next survey.
Now, picking up on some of the stuff that Phil was questioning you on there, that is the necessary requirements for a business if they're coming to an area. If there is underinvestment in infrastructure in an area, if there's underinvestment or lack of provision of grade A office accommodation in an area, well, clearly, whenever straight away before an investor comes, those may well be absolutes for them. So, have you had a chance to look at, by the way, the report on grade A office accommodation? Because if we don't have the space to put people, if they're hopefully knocking down the door to get here, it's really going to provide a major challenge for us.
Yes.
And if you've looked at the report, having looked at the report, have you particular elements of solutions that you might have around that question of grade A office accommodation? I'm sure maybe wearing your professional hat, Kevin, you would come into contact with some potential providers of such accommodation.
Yeah, Chair, you're absolutely right. It is I think for us, it's one of the major issues looking ahead to the next few years, the availability of grade A office space, whether that be in Belfast or whether that be in the regions. And certainly all the figures, indeed backed up by the recent reports, suggest that the supply situation is going to be extremely tight over the next few years if you layer on what we all hope will be delivered as a result of corporation tax devolution. And indeed, I've seen some figures suggesting FDI demand of 820,000 square feet over this period, which over the next 3 years, which compares to a current annual demand of about 225,000. So potentially FDI could double demand for grade A office space over the course of the next few years. You're right. I have a chamber perspective, and I also have a professional perspective. So, if you allow me to comment in both of those contexts, I think in the short term there is an issue around availability of space and around the level of investment that is going into grade A office blocks at the moment. So we start with that position. Ultimately, though, for me, and this is speaking from a financing perspective, for me, I do not believe that there is a fundamental lack of capital in terms of availability for investment, because I regularly, day in, day out, speak to businesses who have the capacity, who have the capital behind them to build Grade A office blocks, whether it's in Belfast or outside Belfast, but to build Grade A office blocks. The reason they are not doing that is because the economic returns are not there at the moment.
Right.
So at 12 to 14 pounds per square foot of rental at the moment, the economic returns simply are not as attractive as they are with other opportunities in front of people.
Right.
So investment is not going into Grade A office blocks. The harbour is a slightly unique situation in that. But for most of our larger companies, for most of our big construction businesses who might have the capacity to make those decisions, to be honest, they can get better returns by investing their capital elsewhere. So what I would suggest needs to happen is that we do need to see an increase in rentals over the course of the next few years to attract capital into the creation of Grade A office space.
That's what I was going to ask, but what's the tipping point? What's the key? Because if you have under provision and you have high demand, that's inevitably going to drive prices way, way, way up.
It will.
But if you're still going to be left with the issue of under provision.
And that's, over the longer term, I think that the point you're raising, Chair, will address the issue, because cost of rents will rise. For me, a figure of about £18 creates the right economic return to attract investment. We're still a way off that, but even if it does move to 18, we're still extremely competitive compared to the rest of the United Kingdom, internationally. So I don't think it'll be a fundamental issue for InvestNI in terms of being able to attract, say, FDI, but it does need to be higher than it is at the moment to attract investment over the longer term. In the short term, there is an argument, perhaps, for some sort of incentive, some sort of initiative to try and drive the short-term position. But over the longer term, I don't believe there's a fundamental market failure.
That's what I was going to come to. That incentive, you're obviously talking about public intervention there, whatever that public intervention may. Should that be by way of grant or inducements, or should it be by way of bringing in secure tenants from the public sector to maybe be, if you like, the first tenant in any new proposed development?
Yeah.
What's the thinking there?
I would be flexible on that. The key issue for me is creating the right economic return to attract investment.
Okay.
And you can do that, Chair, in a number of ways. You can do it by way of a rent subsidy, by way of a capital subsidy, by way perhaps of a public sector intervention in creating a core tenant to allow the rest of a development to become a reality.
Okay.
So there's a range of options there. What I'm saying is, I think in the short term there's an argument for that, but over the longer term, I would hope that if rentals increase, we will actually see capital flow into that opportunity and address some of the challenges that we have over a 3 to 5 year period.
Okay, that's grand, thank you. Ms. Fearon, Megan.
Patsy, thanks very much for the discussion so far. Just the first thing I want to come to, if you could give us your thoughts maybe on our lack of accurate economic data, because the reality is we don't have a comprehensive picture of our local economy, and we would believe that if we had more localised data specific to the north, that we'd be able to design more specific economic strategies that would tackle some of the issues that we're facing.
I think it's probably fair to say that our data isn't too bad. It's difficult to get an angle on kind of economic output on a very regular basis. That's maybe what you're talking about. But you know, there are good barometers there in terms of unemployment. You know, in terms of some of the business startup stats, etc. So I think that as the data goes, I know that it's something that NISRA are conscious of and are trying to strengthen all the time, and obviously even in terms of the exports, have come up with this new indicator on the broad economy exports, which is useful because I was actually thinking about manufacturing there, and support given to manufacturing. There is a growing tradable services base in Northern Ireland, and that's something that's coming again through clearly from the Quarterly Economic Survey, and that's something that might be looked at going forward as to how to try and provide more support to the tradable services sector in terms of some of the incentives that the manufacturing sector get as well. But in terms of statistics, maybe as an economist I don't see it because I work with what I've got, but I think our statistics are quite good, except that angle on really in terms of economic output. But the indicators are largely there, I think.
And Anne, earlier you mentioned broadband, and I was just wondering if that's something that you've surveyed your businesses on, because certainly in Uri and Armagh there would be issues, and there's huge black spots there. You'd have construction companies maybe taking a full day to download a tender. And it is a nightmare for local businesses. So is that something you would have surveyed your businesses on? Or?
We haven't surveyed, but we have participated in a panel that's trying to look at increasing the usage. We're doing that with BT and other mobile providers. And in that regard, we hear, as I said, there's good basic broadband coverage across Northern Ireland, but there are hotspots around. And I mean, Ofcom have got a really good website where you can see, the size of a broadband in an area, you can see the take-up in an area, but then, so it does things like it shows you that Northern Ireland is 94.6 something take-up, but then when you get down to 3G and 4G, it all changes. So we know and we get feedback, but we can also see the Ofcom data, which is very public. So there is issues. I know there's the Rural Broadband Fund, which is, that should help. But there's still more to do.
Yeah, well, and the mobile infrastructure project being rolled out by Arqiva will obviously help connectivity as well. Just in terms of skills, finally, in page 6 of your briefing paper, you've stated that our skills supply is not well aligned to the labour market, and I've certainly heard that our skills supply is not well aligned to the local labour market.
Yeah.
And I've certainly heard that from local IT startups in the last few weeks, actually. But you recommend a reskilling programme. Just if you could give more detail of what that would look like and how we would actually focus on the skills that we require.
Well, I think there really is some good work already happening in that regard. Our FE colleges across the country are connecting well with businesses. The new apprenticeship programme that's coming out, the high-level apprentice schemes will help in that, and we'd be supportive in that. But also, I believe that the cuts to the higher education sector and the further education sector are not coming at the right time. So we would be, if there was any prioritisation, that had to be given, I would say, look at our universities and look at our colleges. I mean, I do know we're going to lose something like 30,000 places in FE colleges over the next, come September. And the universities, although the figure varies, there's about 1,100 places there. So I think we really need to think about that once we get this date and rate, and if there's any extra money.
In terms of the smoother transition from education to the workplace, is it just focused on third level, or would there be a role for GE to take on?
We have some, there's data, our destination of school leavers, 43% go into HE, 34% go into FE, 6% go into employment, and 11% into training. We are hearing from employers that when, despite quite a bit of training and development, some young people still aren't ready for the world of work. They still haven't got good general communication skills. So sometimes they're making wrong career choices. So we would be supportive of, good work experience, good university placements, even a better interaction between business and schools. I mean, we'd love to see a school, business governors in every school across Northern Ireland, a better quality work experience, all the stuff that and it's still a challenge,
Thanks, Patsy.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Mr. Frew, Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask, I know Gordon Dunn raised it earlier about the energy costs, and even going with your own report, 3/5 of business, 62%, state that energy costs are burdensome. And we all know the problems. It's a very, very complicated system with a lot of players involved, all playing their part to make it even more complicated, might I add. But we all need a solution. We all know the problem. We can see it. We can feel it. Businesses feel it. And I suspect if you go to large employers and have industry, you're talking about over 90% would feel that pain, if not even higher. What solutions do the Chamber of Commerce have? Because I know you cited one example, but really and truly that is, you're talking about a small section of relief for a small number of businesses. And in my eyes, what we need is a complete sea change in the way we do energy, and the ICM won't cut it. In fact, it may well make it even more complicated and less transparent. So have we solutions?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier in my response that scale, Northern Ireland struggles with scale, and the interconnection is relatively weak at the minute, and unfortunately we can't capture scale from outside the market, and that's going to be very important to reinstate stronger interconnection, and scale will bring with it benefits. It will allow energy traders, energy suppliers to purchase in other markets, and the ISAM in its intent should allow for free flowing of energy across state boundaries. So I think in its intent it is absolutely the right thing to do, but the devil is in the detail, and we have to see that detail, and it's evolving very, very slowly. Economic development actually helps greatly with spreading the fixed costs, because we have seen, particularly with in the large industrial scene, manufacturing, I suppose, over the last decade has struggled, and particularly on the higher levels of the electricity network, demand has reduced. If we get the right type of economic development, then that demand will increase, and that allows for those fixed costs to be spread over a larger number of units, and that will bring the unit price down as well. So it really is all about scale. I agree, ISAM, we need to all focus on that so that it delivers what it's intended to, but scale is desperately important in the overall equation.
I take your point about isolation and scale, but if you were to, the argument or the solution you've just given about spreading out over the costs, if you take that to its logical conclusion, where the costs are so high that businesses and large employers are coming off the grid, which then makes it even harder. Absolutely. But businesses find that to be vital, so you would have to support them individually. With regards to the move by NIE, with regards to the stopping the grid connections, what's the Chamber's view on that?
Well, I think it's important that we have a very clear strategy and plan to ensure that for new investment into Northern Ireland, that the network does develop to allow timely connection of new demand and new loads onto the system. And I think we all need to work. Clearly, NIE are important. I can't really speak on their behalf, but they'll be very important. But other stakeholders provide vital input to that. Enterprise zones are actually very useful at ensuring it can help identify opportunities where we can develop the more intensive business clusters. Energy-intensive business clusters can be targeted in certain geographical areas, and that could be a very useful tool in the overall economic development.
It's going to be a problem that stays with us for a very long time, and solutions will have to be found by all the players in regards to energy. Can I move then on to the remarks within your report about better regulation? I know that there's been a piece of work done by DETI to try and improve regulation, and you did mention about the business champion, if you like, defending the position of the business world. Is there any signs or evidence that better regulation is happening, or is it getting worse?
Well, I probably, from I'll swap hats again, maybe from a professional perspective, we see a lot of regulation coming down from Europe, and I think there is an opportunity to apply common sense, because its initial intent is developed, or there is a cost-benefit test, but once it reaches a local level, sometimes it becomes distorted, and it's all about ensuring compliance. I don't think we can avoid compliance, but it's complying with the legislation, the most cost-effective way to maximise the benefit that can be achieved and remove all bureaucracy. And I think there have been good steps. I think there were good outputs from that report that are worthy of taking forward. And I think every piece of legislation that gets transposed into Northern Ireland needs to be carefully looked at to ensure that we're getting the best possible and most cost-effective compliance solution.
I note your comments about the European Union. Who do we blame? Who does the Chamber of Commerce blame for regulation? It won't all be labelled or pointed in one direction, I'm sure, but where is the bulk of the problem coming from? Is it Europe, or is it Northern Ireland's interpretation of the regulation?
It's probably a bit of both. I think work does need to be. I'd mentioned that we probably do need to go more to the source, to Brussels, to put our case forward so that we can catch legislation before it's fully developed. And I think more can be done at a local level as we start to interpret, as regulators locally start to interpret some of these regulations.
With regards to business at the minute, obviously export is critical to Northern Ireland, and of course with the currencies being as they are, the euro and the dollar and the pound in comparison, causing big problems for exporters. You do recommend increased support for exporters. In what guise will that come? What will that look like? And what sort of support is currently available?
I think that there is actually good support available for exporters at the moment, particularly existing exporters. And the Export Action Plan that's being developed at the moment, obviously that's trying to have a look at what's there and what could be done. So in fairness, that is in development. I mean, I know one of the things that struck me from looking at support, for example, in the Republic of Ireland, they have very specific support, for example, for potential exporters. And that seems to work very well in terms of seeing who has the capability. Not every business will have the capability to export. There's finance available for exporters here, and I know that's something that the Chamber's been very actively involved in as well. So I think there is good support there. There might be a couple of gaps in it, and hopefully the Export Action Plan will identify those. And then it's really about, as with most things, it's about businesses understanding what's out there. Anne mentioned that earlier in terms of the broader support. But typically, when you try to understand, what programmes are available, it's very, very difficult to navigate that, I think, still for business. And particularly, those younger businesses, the ones that maybe don't know what kind of help they could get that's out there. So I think that's critical.
And particularly for so many startup businesses that are so time poor, in that early stage, there's so many competing demands.
Yes, okay. Hey, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Mr. McKinney, Fergal?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I apologise for not being at the start here. And thank you all for your presentations. You mentioned that tax rates are problematic. Maybe you could elaborate a bit more on that, especially given that the tax regime comes from Westminster and most of it is not devolved. I know you've hit on rates earlier on, but clearly there's a gap in knowledge too about how most recent rises of impact.
Yeah, I guess we're coming from two perspectives, Fergal. Firstly, in terms of the competitiveness challenges that Northern Ireland business specifically has, and we've talked about that in terms of scale and some of the particular Northern Ireland issues. So we believe the likes of business rates has our role to play in acknowledging that competitiveness challenge and help to create a level playing field for business so that Northern Ireland can move forward at the pace we all hope it will. And then obviously the second point is around helping to drive investment and growth with any resources that are not used for paying tax being diverted back into business, into investment, and obviously corporation tax is the example on that one. Where we have so many businesses saying to us, and we're talking about Indigenous businesses saying to us that reduction in tax will create an opportunity for them to invest that money back into growth and jobs.
But when you refer to the tax rates being problematic, you're talking about corporation tax. You're not talking about
largely.
Largely, yeah. Okay. You also talk about innovative techniques to fund investment, and you say the Scottish Futures Trust, etc., etc. How would that work here?
Yep. The example of the Scottish Futures Trust is worth having a look at, and that's why we mention it specifically in our document. They have, in particular, they've developed something called a non-profit distributing model, which is the next, or a variant or a next stage on from the old PFI or PPP models, which were very popular at one time, but ran into issues, in particular around the debate over private sector returns built into some of those projects. So what Scottish Futures Trust have developed is when we say non-profit distributing, essentially it's a capped return for the private sector within some of those projects. So in many ways it looks similar to some of the old PFI, PPP projects, which allow private sector investment to come in, substituting for government capital and so on, but at the same time also has a capped return built into it, so that some of the excesses which perhaps discredited many of those PPP, PFI projects are prevented from happening in the future.
What implications are there for the block grant in levering private funding for what is government business infrastructure?
Well, at its simplest, anywhere we can attract and incentivise private sector to come in substitution for government capital grants has to be a good thing.
Would London subtract it off the block grant? Have we worked that out yet?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I mean, that whole rural broadband fund was, BT funded it by 29 million, Derry 18 million, and Dard 1.5. And all it does is, it probably leaves more to be reinvested.
That tune bypass that you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't see why there would be an argument for deducting it on the basis that the government has sourced it from the private sector. Obviously, there's an impact on ongoing revenue costs for government, but it would effectively be fresh money that isn't being taken out of the capital budget.
Okay. You also talk about creating the right financial environment and improving awareness and access to alternative sources of finance, but how does government do that in practical terms? Should business not be taking more responsibility for that too?
Yeah, the business very definitely has a role to play in that. There's a number of points that I suppose that statement speaks to, Fergal. It's around education of financial executives within banks, for example, making sure that they're aware of the entire range of options, so that very often they are the first port of call for a young business who may not yet be appropriate for debt finance. But one of the opportunities is to make sure that the business managers then understand, okay, debt may not be the appropriate product for you at this stage in your company life cycle, but did you know that Invest in I have an entire range of products within an access to finance continuum, and some of those might indeed be the right product. So
is that what you're talking about in your education forum?
It's one of the pieces around education forum, and then the wider piece around just making sure that we communicate. And the Chamber has a very definite role to play in this, and to make sure that we're communicating what is available, the opportunities, the schemes that are there. We touch on R&D tax credits and so on. That's a good example where Chamber and business can work together to try and make the most of that opportunity.
We're doing a couple of things. Obviously, Invest in I have really good information on all their sources of funds, like White Rock Fund and all the rest of it. So we would be promoting that out around businesses across Northern Ireland. But we're also, in my access to finance role, we have been meeting with the Institute of Chartered Accountants and see how they can get all that information out across. There's the big four accountants would, generally know quite a lot about all the schemes, but many businesses are advised by small rural accountants that they've maybe gone to school with, or they've, been based in the town for lots of years. And some of them, with the greatest respect, although talented individuals, aren't totally up to date with all the schemes out there. So we're working on doing some regional workshops in that regard. So it's anything that encourages people to know more so that they become better advisors is important.
And who would take the lead in a business forum or education forum?
I think, I don't know if there's a single lead in it. I think there's initiatives across all of the interested parties there, Fergal. Whether it's both the business organisations such as ourselves and the likes of banks, and all of us, I think, have a role to play.
Yeah, the chartered accountants too.
Yeah. Just zooming out for a second, because I just touched on Patsy's point at the start about strategically driven planning, and so Patsy, you're alerting us all and reminding us that that's absent in very many cases. But in the absence of that, the continued pressure on the block grant and the failure of our private sector, not the failure, but the weakness of our private sector, what does all that say about our sustainability going forward?
We have touched, the issues of scale, the issues of the specific challenges that we face being an island off an island, and all of that, Fergal, are very well rehearsed, but they're also very real. And they are tangible challenges that we face. I think the challenge for all of us is accepting those, acknowledging those. How do we create the right environment to drive growth for the future? And that's why we particularly welcome this discussion and this piece of work that the ETI committee are doing, because we think that's what we should be talking about. Let's get corporation tax on the books. Let's clarify the rate, the date point, and then create the environment for business to get on with what you want them to get on with and what we want them to get on with, creating opportunities for our people on the ground.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Dan Tussel O'Muller, Martin.
Nice to see you again, and Maureen as well. And my apologies as well for being late. I wanted to pick up on the issue of partnership. Our friends from the Concentrix Global Board, Cynics, were in Belfast last week, and one of the members of the Global Board said, "Who's telling the story about your city?" And you know, a special interest in Belfast. Who's putting the narrative out there about the changes in the city? And I just wonder, when talking of partnership, is there a role for an organisation, whether it's a council or a partnership or an alliance or a competitive partnership, as they have in the city of Boston, that will help government and those of us in government tell the story about Belfast? I don't want to ask you to spend money on that, but when you look even at the good news from Concentrix taking over Maysfield, spending £10 million, turning it into an office headquarters. Allstate just buying a site just beside that. You really have an arc of development there on the river, and then Deloitte at the gasworks. But sometimes I think that we need more people to tell that story. So the question, I suppose, for the Chamber is there a way between now and the next couple of years where we can do more in partnership to tell that bright story?
There definitely is, and I know, Belfast City Council have been doing good work in that area already. I know they've been, I can't remember the name of the document, but it's around basically, taking responsibility. We have different departments that do inward investment, say, or skills or whatever, but there's a whole city narrative, as you say, and I can't remember the name, but we've all been consulted on how we describe Belfast, how we promote Belfast. And we're trying to agree key messages that we can all do together. So if we as a Chamber are out anywhere, we can talk about the key facts and figures of around Belfast. So there's work progressing there, and I think Belfast City Council have a very strong role to play in that.
And I'm just wondering, maybe, are you leaving the work to Belfast City Council?
Oh gosh, no.
Might you be able to do better than Belfast City Council?
I've attended about 3 different sessions where we have jointly agreed, myself and other business organisations and other players like airports or whatever. We've all been attending these sessions to agree, what are the key messages we're putting out there about Northern Ireland. And that's something, it's still at the early stages of development, but it's something we completely support. Well, us as a Chamber, we spend our life promoting our 1,200 members. We have our magazine Ambition, we have our e-zines, and it's all about positive messaging. And even the likes of Concentrix here last week, as you know, I Well, I think I met you down there afterwards. But we, our next feature is all about the investment of GEM coming into Concentrics, being part of Sinex, etc. And they're great stories that we're trying to encourage across Northern Ireland. We had a whole campaign called Growing Something Brilliant for 3 years, which was trying to inspire businesses to grow and to share the great stories. And we're happy to do that with Belfast City Council, with anyone else out there. Yeah.
Okay. Next, Mr. Kinahan, Danny.
Thank you. Apologies for being late, and sorry not to have heard your presentation. I've got lots of questions. I think you probably answered most of them, but one following on from Fergal is I was always under the impression that we can't gear money on the back of our block grant, but councils, the new super councils, are in a position. So one question is, do you see councils, therefore, being more key in learning how to finance and use finance? And should we, the other end of it is, should we then be having our own investment sort of bank or fund here that allows a bit more freedom?
Yep. Okay. Number of interesting points that you're raising within that, Danny. Certainly, we do believe the changes with the local councils are a real opportunity for changing that dynamic in terms of economic development in local areas, and indeed. We, as the Northern Ireland Chamber, have been espousing the concept of the local chambers across Northern Ireland as perhaps having a key role to play in that. The likes of the community plans and so on. I think the local chambers across Northern Ireland are the ideal representatives to contribute to the development of those plans. They have the local insight and the understanding of the needs of business at a local level. The opportunities for the councils, I think we're beginning to see that as they work through the new powers that they have in front of them. I don't think we would say it's by any means fully developed, but I think it's an inevitable consequence of simply the timing of where we are on that. I think there are real opportunities. The new powers that they we haven't yet seen those actually being flexed, but I think there's potential there for real growth.
Yeah, in terms of business support, I know all the councils they come out together to do a review of the current startup programme, and I would welcome them continuing a startup programme across Northern Ireland. I would hope that they would consider a Northern Ireland-wide business support programme. But I also think they should, as councils, recognise the role Invest NI play in inward investment, and that they work, they cooperate, and don't start going off in different areas in that regard.
The one area we also mention in our proposal is planning.
Yes.
Which obviously does cut across the whole piece of economic development, but we're suggesting within our paper that thought should be given to putting some sort of KPIs around planning decisions across the board, really to set standards of what we expect. England worked to 8 weeks for simple planning, 13 weeks for complex planning. Why shouldn't we be setting similar targets for Northern Ireland? We proposed 10 weeks within our paper, but that's a proposal. Yeah. But I do think that equally, as we encourage the economic development powers that they have now in front of them, we should also be challenging them in terms of measures and actual performance.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Danny. That concludes our session today. Thanks very much indeed for giving up your time, all of you. It's great to see you all again. And obviously, we'll keep the dialogue going. Now, the aim of the report is, as you're probably aware anyway, that we draft up when we have a stakeholder event this afternoon, that we draft up our conclusions, and they are then shared with the respective government departments to act as a form, if you like, that integrated approach that we were referring to earlier,
yes,
the requirements, and hopefully we'll get over the line too on the decision on corporation tax as well. So
let's hope so, and we thank you for this opportunity to meet with you, Chair, and we certainly wish you well in that work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you. Now, the next item is agenda item number 6, an oral briefing from Northern Ireland Electricity. And just 4 members, we have a briefing note at page 32, NIE briefing paper at page 33, NIE briefing paper for the minister at page 41, corresponds from NIE, that's at pages 57 and 59. So, with us here today from NIE, we have Mr. Nicholas Byrne, the Managing Director. If you want to come forward, please just. Mr. Peter Ewing, Deputy Managing Director and Director of Regulation. Mr. Michael Atkinson, Head of Generation Connections, and Mr. Ian Bailey, Distribution Planning Manager. You're all very welcome indeed. I know I've met you before, Mr. Tarn, but not in the formal capacity. I think this will be your first time at this committee, wouldn't it? So you're very welcome indeed. So the nature of it, you've been listening very intently, I'm sure, to the previous session, and indeed one of your colleagues there was with us too. The floor is now open to yourselves to make your opening remarks, and then we move to the questioning session from members. Okay?
Thanks very much, Chair. Good morning, and good morning to everyone on the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee today on issues related to the electricity network. Specifically, we're going to deal with the status of the electricity grid in the context of economic and business growth over the coming years, and we will also deal with connecting renewable energy to the electricity network.
Excuse me just a minute, there's a wee bit of interruption, you probably noticed. Is there any chance, Chris, you could check that out, please? Just thank you. Can you continue on? Just please, Nicholas.
Okay, so we have made two separate submissions to the committee, which I hope you have. The first is titled NIE Briefing on Grid Capacity in Northern Ireland in the Context of Enabling Economic Growth, and the second is titled NIE Briefing on Connecting Renewable Generation to the Electricity Network. Both issues are complex, and we hope that the committee find these documents helpful in setting out the current status and our view of the way forward on both subjects. Chairman, I'm proposing to make some very brief introductory remarks and then hand over to Ian Bailey, who is the manager of our distribution planning function. He's going to deal with the issue of enabling economic growth, and then Michael Atkinson is going to say a few words on connecting renewable generation to the network. So NIE is a regulated company, regulated by the utility regulator, and we operate in the energy sector under the policy direction from DETI. We're currently just over halfway through the RP5 price control implementation. We're expecting a major ramp up in work volume between now and September 2017, which is the end of the RP5 price control period. We're also at an important stage in the RP6 price control preparation. The RP6 price control is going to set out the work on the network between 2017 and 2022. And I believe it is particularly relevant to today's discussion on grid development. 2015 is a key year for NIE to develop a business plan for RP6 and to engage with stakeholders on matters relating to electricity network development. We have a structured RP6 stakeholder engagement process that has a steering group with representatives from the utility regulator, DETI, the Consumer Council and NIE. The current review being undertaken by this committee is coming at a very good time as a potential feed into the RP6 process. So, NIE is committed to investing in the electricity network to support economic growth. Under the current regulatory regime, the cost of these investments is paid for over a 40-year period. So it's important to take a long-term view on this, what is effectively strategic infrastructure. We have ideas and recommendations that we hope the committee find useful, and I'm now going to pass over to Ian first to deal with the electricity network and economic growth, and then Michael will follow with, and deal briefly with renewables.
Good morning. NIE undertakes two distinct types of capital investment on the electricity network. Firstly, asset replacement. Secondly, investment associated with load-related growth. Asset replacement accounts for almost 90% of our network investment, and that's mainly due to the replacement of age-expired assets or assets that are outside normal operating condition due to the condition of them. And that's really down to the network dating. The majority of our network dates from the 1950s, 1960s, so a lot of that's coming up for replacement. I'm here today primarily to discuss the load-related element of our investment strategy and how this is used to develop the distribution network in Northern Ireland. Key drivers for load investment are load growth, investment associated, reinforcement associated with customer connections, opportunistic investment. By that I mean where there's other utilities doing work and we can gain efficiencies by doing work in cooperation with other utilities or other public bodies, and also investment associated with delivering distributed generation. The main driver for load investment is the load-related investment.
That's going to be picked up.
Similar to all electricity companies, NIA has a formal process to monitor network utilisation and to forecast future load at individual sites across Northern Ireland. This allows comparison between future peak loads and system capacities to identify potential hotspots, allowing NIE to plan investment intervention in a timely manner. In assessing reinforcement options, NIE utilises cost-benefit analysis techniques to identify the optimum solution. We see that this is the least cost technically acceptable solution. Consequently, investment is carefully targeted to cater for the underlying load growth across the network. However, applications for individual point load increases, example a new factory or a new production line in an existing plant, may result in local capacity issues. These are likely to be exacerbated for customers located in more rural areas. In many cases, the investment to cater for the underlying growth does create some additional headroom which can be taken up by individual customers. How that comes about is that when NIE replaces assets, standard ratings of assets may be in excess of the reinforcement requirement, thereby creating a level of headroom. We also can create headroom because whenever we invest for growth, we build in a number of years' growth into the life scheme of the project, and that creates a certain level of headroom as well. Where the increase in an individual customer's capacity cannot be accommodated, the full cost of the least cost technically acceptable solution for reinforcement is passed on to the customer. This is in line with the NIE statement of charges for connection to the network, which is approved by the utility regulator. To consider developing a network with available spare capacity to facilitate the connection of point loads, regardless of location and without potential delay involved in reinforcement, would require substantial additional network investment. Even if the level of network investment was available, the issue is that such point load increases and their locations are unpredictable. The question for me as a network designer is where do we develop the capacity and how much spare capacity should I design for? Creating such a network may seem desirable, but would require substantial additional investment across the province in anticipation of possible future load applications. This would create the potential for stranded investment. By stranded investment, we mean that where we would invest in areas of the province to create infrastructure, to create capacity, and that capacity is never taken up. That's what we term as a stranded investment. This would place an unnecessary increase in overall tariffs to the general body of customers. Some level of anticipatory investment is undertaking. NI works closely with the likes of InvestNI in creating electrical capacity at designated commercial industrial parks across the province. In these cases, InvestNI approaches all utilities to provide the infrastructure for service sites. This is funded by InvestNI or through government, and industry then is directed to those specific areas. It still creates the potential for stranded investment if the site never doesn't mature or industry is attracted to those specific areas. This type of approach works well and could be extended through higher levels of investment. Example, the creation of power parks or more enterprise zones in selected areas. Depending on the desired capacity, this would also require input from the transmission system operator in Northern Ireland and so on. This type of anticipatory investment could assist with economic development, but at a significant additional cost. If not funded by the general customer base through tariffs, it will need to be funded by some other means. This is a central policy question which would have to be considered by DETI, UR and other stakeholders. And I would suggest that an initial useful step would be to convene a working group at which illustrative solutions and scenarios and their scale of costs could be explored. We believe that such a group would be best served if chaired by DETI, and NIE would be fully supportive of this initiative. I'd like now to hand over to my colleague Michael Atkinson, who will talk about generation connection.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Struggling slightly with a bit of a cough, so I hope I sort of don't move into a convulsion here. But anyway, I sort of spoken to the committee last year, and hopefully this gives you something of an update in terms of where we are at the minute. Generally speaking, we have made very solid progress in terms of the overall connections of renewables in Northern Ireland. In fact, NIE is connected more generation per customer versus any other of the network operators on the mainland. We're actually achieving 20% consumption from renewables now versus the 40% target. The target itself requires around 1,600 megawatts of renewables to be connected, and at this point over 1,260 megawatts have been connected, and the other applications that are already in the system and processing through the system would bring us beyond the 1,600 megawatt figure required for 40%. The briefing document that we've issued was designed to maybe give a bit of a perspective on a topic that can be complex and full of acronyms, but at a high level, organised plans are in place for what we describe as large-scale generation, the large wind farms, developing the transmission backbone network and what we call cluster nodes to allow more efficient connection of renewables. That's going well. The work that's underway to enable us to move from 20% where we are at the minute up to 27% in terms of transmission capacity is moving well, and it's advancing to plan towards the end of 2016. There's also been a good rollout of what we describe as cluster substations. These are substantive high voltage nodes on the network to allow the large wind farms to connect. However, at a strategic level, moving beyond 27% does require much more sizable investment in the transmission network, and that's an important point to be wary of. In terms of the focus on large-scale generation, really what we're pursuing now is the construction work on what we describe as the medium-term plan and the rollout of clusters with a particular sensitivity of making progress there before the end of 2016, which aligns with the current timetable for the existing incentive regimes. The small-scale generation is more problematic. We've talked at some length at this forum previously on that. Significant issues, as you've been aware, have arisen on the distribution network. It's now largely saturated across many parts of Northern Ireland, and that's visible in the heat map, which we update now regularly. We established a Project 40 group in the middle of last year to address matters associated with both large and small-scale generation. A particular focus of that has been on the small-scale side. That group really comprises stakeholders from the utility regulator, DETI, SONI, NIRIG, the industry participants, the Ulster Farmers Union, and a number of developers. And that group and that work has focused on expediting the rollout of clusters, alternative connection agreement arrangements for small-scale generators, and also establishing consistent rules, protocols in a very busy environment. We're at a critical stage now in that we've invested in some work at some 40 substations to release headroom. That's actually allowed another 100 or so projects to proceed, released some 30 megawatts onto the system. We've submitted further proposals now to the utility regulator for work at additional 28 substations, which would release another 30 megawatts or so. And alongside that proposal, there's a proposal in for some additional pilot work to test the feasibility or the workability of what we describe as a managed connection, which is a different way of connecting some of the parties who at present we are unable to provide connection offers to. And if that funding is successful and the pilot is successful, it would enable us to roll out managed connections from the early part of next year. There is a health warning of sorts around this, in that managed connections may not provide a solution for everybody. We've got several hundred applicants who are sitting in that category at the minute, where because of capacity issues we're unable to connect them. So it's unlikely that we will be able to find a solution for everybody that works within the timetable of the current incentive regime. So there will be disappointments out there, and we're very conscious of that in our day-to-day interactions with developers. So the focus on small-scale generation then largely is to use and really our recommendation is to use the Project 40 grouping and the close working relationships we've now established with stakeholders to over the coming months to test the potential for the managed connections, and also our efforts to secure funding on further more conventional investments that would release some remaining headroom on the network. But we're essentially squeezing out a sponge which is becoming ever more dry. There is probably a limit to just how much of the small-scale generation can be connected, and in parallel with the work that we're doing, Sony, who's the system operator, is looking at just how that quantum of small-scale generation actually impacts the higher level parts of the network, and indeed leads to impacts on large-scale generators and the amount of curtailment, for example, that they experience. So that's broadly where we are on the generation side, generation connections.
Okay, thanks very much. You'll appreciate the problem has been about for a good while, Mr. Bailey, and it inevitably has repeatedly come up through and with this committee. So whenever I hear the idea of a working group being set up, it's kind of a wee bit, you get is this another analysis group to analyse, which is a very stark issue, and it shouldn't really take a working group to work its way through this at this late stage in the game, and that people are anticipating, well, the solutions are probably staring you right in the face. The things that are coming to the likes of me, and I would have to say thanks to some of your staff for meeting out on site and places like those to try and work through some of the detail of them. But those are basically delays that are holding up connection to the grid, which are delaying economic development. And that economic development could be of a nature where people are trying to get onto the grid with a small turbine or something like that, or it could be, as has been the case, a significant economic project such as that at Dunman, and how the grid is so weak west of the Ban as not to be able to provide the capacity. Now, you're going to say, yes, there is capacity there, but it'll come at a price. But for any business which is saying close to a district town, we would be anticipating that grid to be off that capacity to be able to absorb economic development. Now, in the context of where we are today, with our inquiry, we're seeing there are a number of issues such as roads, networks, communications, broadband, and all of those, but an integral part of that infrastructure is obviously the grid. Now, I was listening very carefully to what you were saying there about identifying where, if you like, the pressure points are going to be. I sat one day over at Aldergrove. I'm sorry, is that a division?
Is that a quorum?
Or in Corriat? Can we just check on that? If it's in Corriat, I don't think there should be any votes. No?
There's the
EDR?
Yeah, there'll be a vote today.
But if we could just continue my point, I sat at Aldergrove, you know, with the air traffic control people, and the man in charge just showed me the map, and straight off, it was very, very apparent to me where the hot spots were. Very apparent. So, do you work with them or sit down with them to see it? All you have to do is look at the dots right across the map, and you can see where the major issues of concern are. So, I may well have to just drop proceedings here if that's right. And we may all have to scarper out of the room. So, if I cut you short, it's not because I've been temperate or anything. It's just because we have to go for a vote.
Think of an answer.
You've made a number of points there, and one specific one to a certain customer application.
Sorry, I may well have to. It's a vote. Sorry about this.
Right. Okay.
We just have to drop it in these circumstances. We'll be back probably about 10 minutes' time. Okay.
Okay.
Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29.
So, apologies for that, gentlemen, but the vote's done and dusted now. So, where were we? think it's you, Mr. Bailey.
Yes, you'd asked you covered a number of points there. First thing I would mention is that you talked about up there traffic control, and they had a map showing all the different planning applications across the province. We ourselves would do something similar. We get informed of all planning applications to see how it would impact on the network. But we also would have separate maps, like a heat map, we would refer to it. We have that on our website, and that actually shows, for the likes of anybody looking to connect a generator, it shows areas of the network which are fairly well saturated and possibly lead to higher costs or a potential delay in connection, and substations that need reinforcement to allow them to operate in reverse power. If you imagine a distribution network was always designed that power flowed from the main power station down to the house, so it all flowed the way through transformers. Some of these transformers are now being asked to operate in reverse, i.e. there's more generation on the lower network that operate in reverse. They were never designed for that. So we need some investment in some of those older transformers to allow that to happen, and that's a restriction on them.
I think my point being is, if you know, it's a wee bit like a shop or a business, if you know where the high areas of demand are, how do you integrate that into your investment package? I think that's it. Like the big issue has been, clearly for me, representing the area west of the Ban, the pressures there, the pressures from the turbines and how those affect. How then does that inform and strategically influence the investment that's been made by yourselves?
Yes. Okay. Well, there's two areas. One is the reinforcement for generation, and maybe let Michael have a chat about that in a few minutes. But if we're looking at reinforcement of the network for load connections, and you referred to one customer there in the Cookstown area that had an application in with us. As I mentioned in my initial presentation there, NIE, like all electricity companies, we try our best to look at historical demands at the specific sites, extrapolate that forward, look at other environmental impacts and all, to try and forecast forward as accurately as possible. But obviously forecasting in the future is, to get it accurate, it's a bit of hit and miss with it. But we try to get some sort of indication as to what the level of demand at each site is, and to when that's going to breach the capacities of those particular sites. And then we're sort of target our investment in those areas to ensure that the capacity is there. So what I then went on to say that in doing that, then we know there's a certain level of capacity available, and when we do the reinforcement, that creates more headroom. So for example, if we're requiring 8 MVA of capacity at a site, transformer, or standard size transformer, would be a 10 MVA, put a 10 MVA, and that creates 2 MVA of available capacity. That's available then for any customer comes along, can connect, can avail of that free capacity without having to pay the deeper reinforcement costs. And I think in the notes that we provided earlier, identified, particularly around Cookstown, Tyrone area, a number of customers weren't at liberty to divulge the names, but a number of sites that actually have availed of available headroom on the sites and got free connections or an upgrade to their connection free of charge, or just had to pay the local connection charge to the network rather than deep reinforcement. So customers can avail of that. And our growth and our extrapolating forward looks at what we see as a reasonable low growth within those sites, bearing in mind the nature of it. We take account of Department of Environment Planning area plans, where they would see areas of development, brownfield sites, etc., would be developed, or new greenfield sites zoned for development. We take those into account. We look at the volumes of connections, applications coming in from different areas into our business. We talk to Invest NI, we talk to other bodies that would be involved in developing new customers, for example, the Harbour Commissioners or whatever, those sort of bodies, to try and anticipate where the growth is going to be and build that into our forecast model. Now, that forecast model will allow for, as I said a minute ago there, applications coming in for increased load or new loads, which would be deemed reasonable and would be within that headroom. But for the one you actually cite there, to come in and ask for an 8 MVA demand, it was 8 MVA demand on a rural network, is well beyond what the capability of that network was the available capacity that was at that particular point in the network. So therefore, we have to look at, well, what reinforcements required to provide that capacity to that customer, and then sort of down to cost. So we design the lowest cost solution to provide that customer with the capacity he needs, and it comes down to cost. So under our charging guidelines at the minute, those customers then are fully liable to 100% of that cost. Now, the alternative is that if it's not passed through to the customer, who does pay for it? That's our concern. Now, to go back then further to say, well, okay, that's one customer coming into Cookstown. Why do we not have that capacity available to him? Again, as I went through there in my introduction, okay, if we made 8 MVA available in the Cookstown area for any customer comes along, he comes along. If we then have to make it available in Omagh, in Limavady, in Strabane, in Ballymena, in Newry, you know, at every node, if that was to be created, that's creating a substantial additional network investment, as I mentioned before, across the network. And how much capacity do I design for at Omagh, Strabane, Limavady, you know? Do I design for 8 MVA? And a customer comes in and asks for 9? You know, so it's very difficult for us to determine, on the unpredictable nature of an application coming in from a customer, what capacity should be available at every site. So we use our historic knowledge, our historic growth rates. We use our knowledge there to try and predict what we see as the load at certain sites, and we target our investment at those particular sites. But we cannot predict customers coming in out of the blue. I have a development opportunity here. I want a connection. Now, the other issue with that particular customer was not only the cost, was the delay in connection to the site, because I think we quoted him possibly up to 2 years for delivery of that. Now, that was the outside, up to 2 years. And the reason we do that is that particular connection required, I think it was about 24 kilometres of overhead line across from Toome direction down to the customer site. That line then has to go through third-party property. We have to get legality sorted out and get the agreements with the customers to get that. It has to go through planning, and then we have to get the agreement of customers. We are aware within that area there has been in the past opposition to us putting lines up. We were advising the customer, this is the potential. We could run into difficulties here, which is outside NIE's control of opposition to the lines going up. Now, we can then, in a position, do we work with the landowner and try and push through, get the agreement, or do we look for alternative routes which lengthen the circuit, add costs, or do we go to cable, which significantly adds costs for those certain sections? So those are the debates that we would have with the customer if we run into those sort of difficulties.
Okay, and
Sorry, can I just make follow up on one point on a question you asked about a working group, and just to give a little bit of background as to why we're making that recommendation. Just building on what Ian has said about potentially over-investing in the network and having stranded assets across the province. It kind of echoes the point that was made in the previous session this morning with the Chamber of Commerce about having clusters, and that's essentially what our recommendation is to have particular targeted areas in Northern Ireland where there would be potentially increased capacity to allow businesses to connect, and not overinvest by having the entire area of Northern Ireland having additional capacity. So that's not a decision that NIE can make on its own. It would have to be done in consultation with other stakeholders. So we can't decide if it is Cookstown or if it is Limavady or whatever area should be, where that extra capacity should be put in. But I think it's quite a quick piece of work that could be done to identify where that is, but it depends on other stakeholders, and that's just the background to that recommendation.
So is that your solution to it, that we adopt a clustering?
Well, we're putting it forward as an idea for consideration. I think that's a policy decision, really, that needs to be made as to how economic investment should be made right across Northern Ireland. But that is an idea that could be cost-effective from the point of view of reducing the risk of having stranded infrastructure. However, it doesn't give a guarantee, because the businesses actually have to come in afterwards and actually use that capacity. But it kind of builds on the relationship that we would have had in the past with InvestNI, for example, where they would have come in, as Ian mentioned, to get connections for power parks. So that type of idea, we think, is something that could be considered by the committee.
Okay, and then, Michael, the issue of overall planning. I think.
Well, I think, Chair, you'd mentioned, you talked about generation as well, and I suppose it's just to highlight, without trying to make it any more confusing, that the generation situation is very different to one for a convention compared to a customer coming in trying to set up a normal load connection, where they're essentially sucking energy out of the network. With a generation connection, we're effectively pushing energy back in the opposite direction. And when you look at, for example, when you consider the heat map that I think you've probably seen before, and it identifies pressure points and red dots where we have problems, that's because the network isn't receptive to reverse flows in those locations. In fact, if there was more load connecting in those areas, it would actually increase the potential for generation to connect, because the energy could be used up locally. The problem with generation is we're trying to push energy back up through these primary substations onto the higher level parts of the network, and eventually finds its way back to Belfast, where most of the load is. But it's a different phenomenon to the one that Ian's describing in terms of load. Typical, customers coming in and trying to establish load connections on the network.
Okay, thank you for that. Phil, call upon Phil to take over. But maybe in the first instance we'll call upon Mr. Dunn. Gordon here.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation. We're glad to see you again. Microgrids are something that we have heard various mentions in different presentations. Have you looked at the full potential for microgrids and the full development? As I understand it, there are opportunities really to develop or generate electricity locally and to use it locally. Do you see the potential that there are?
Well, there was certainly discussion over the last year or so, and we know the Ulster Farmers Union, for example, were quite keen to promote the idea of microgrids. I mean, in our experience of this, microgrids putting into place in an effective way have been quite limited, and part of the outcome of that process with DETI was certainly that we work with DETI, the utility regulator, to look potentially more closely at microgrids or whatever solutions those might bring forward. But certainly our understanding of that was that the likelihood was that activity would probably move further back into the next regulatory review period. In the immediate term, the microgrids, I suppose, represent a level of automation on the system and local management of energy. Really the extent to which we've got so far is to look at the specific situations we have with small-scale generation and trying to find a more automated way to connect small-scale generators into the network. But we're not currently exploring microgrids.
You're not?
In any substantive way, nor do we have funding to do so.
What do the long-term potential for them? Do you reckon that they will stack up and be useful? We certainly have had quite strong advocates in here, for it, and you probably are aware of them. But this whole thing, to me, I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that you generate locally and use it locally, and why not do that rather than having to?
We have interest from a number of parties. One in particular towards the north coast, which is looking at setting up their own microgrids, basically taking the supply from NIE and developing their own infrastructure where they have the load and the generation. Now, the issue with microgrids is that you have to have that continual balance between the load and the generation. Otherwise, you have voltage distortions on the system. They've got to be totally balanced. at this present moment in time, the way NIE is contracted, that each application comes into us for a connection direct onto our circuit. It's either a generation wanting connected or a load wanting connected. Now, that guy wanting his load connected, he wants a 24-hour supply, he wants a quality of supply, and that's what we're obligated to give him under our licence agreement when he makes a connection. Generator connection is a firm connection, he wants the same. So we've got a contract with each of those. We don't have a mechanism at present under our licence to tie the two together, to allow the generator only to generate when the load's on.
Yeah, yeah.
But the big benefit of the guys are looking at the private network, where they would take a supply from NIE and then they would develop their own infrastructure. They can manage that because they've taken a contractual connection from NIE at a certain point and internally can try and manage that load themselves, the balance between the load and the generation.
Okay. Can I just maybe just add to that point briefly? I think the features that we'll see in the grid over the next decade are going to see things like increasing automation on the grid, so more control of how load flow happens. So that's going to be a feature that kind of ties in a little bit with microgrids. The second issue is I think we're going to see more storage, so energy storage, electricity storage, and that is also supportive of that general direction towards more smart grids. And we certainly would like to see more automation on the network as a general point, because it also helps customer service, because it means that faults can be restored more quickly if there's more automation on the grid, as an example. But if you take the overall picture in Northern Ireland in general, a lot of the wind generation now is in the west of the province, and the load demand is in the east. So the idea of having more localised microgrids is challenging in that respect, because that local balance between generation and the load demand needs to be present for those microgrids. But I think it's something that we're going to see more of it over the coming decade.
Okay, just one other thing, Chair. A point that I've been working with on NIE for and on a number of issues. Customers at the moment have, as I understand, have to pay up front in full. Is that the case for all customers before work is commenced by NIE? There seems to be now a policy decision that customers have to pay up front in full before work is commenced.
Well, I mean, and on the generation connection side, and in the main we're talking about small-scale generation connections, the applicant will initially pay an application fee to go through the process of getting an offer and his assessment. But at the point where he accepts his offer, he would only pay 20% of the total cost of the connection. And that's right almost at that first stage where he's been issued his offer and he accepts it. And then once what we call the pre-construction work, which is getting the consents and legality sorted out, once that's completed, and we're approaching the final construction stage, which normally takes 8 or 10 weeks, we go to the customer and ask for the final 80% of the balance at that point. So they're certainly with a generation connection, they're not paying.
Yes, for just general work, running new supplies to businesses and so on. There seems to be this demand now for upfront payment.
Yeah, I'm not just familiar with the term.
Our charging statement requires that, as Michael has said, whenever we quote on acceptance of terms, there is either a percentage, or if it's major infrastructure that we want to forward purchase transformers or whatever, would require as part of the deposit the cost to allow us to buy that large infrastructure. By then we would then pursue planning requests and landowner agreements and all to allow the infrastructure to go ahead. But prior to construction, we would request full payment for all works.
Yeah, full payment. Yeah.
It does mean that there's a step, and effectively, I suppose the principle that NI adopts is to try and remain cash positive through the process, so that in the initial stages, a deposit amount, in the case of generation connections, it's 20%, will allow that pre-construction activity, the survey and way levers, to go out and get their work done. But at the time when we then commit to the final construction, we're sort of booking hard pieces of plant, expensive equipment, etc., and it's appropriate at that point to ask for the final balance. But that's usually a relatively short time before the connection is actually delivered on the ground. So there is a phased step approach to it.
Okay, right. Okay, thanks, Chair. Thank you. William?
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. Can I ask, what progress has NIE made on the development of a communication strategy for developers in which NIE commits to customer communication engagement with regards to the grid connection?
And are you thinking generally around
Yes.
connection? Try that one.
As part of our RP6 planning coming in, which is due to commence in October 2017, NI are now engaging on a stakeholder engagement process to discuss with all stakeholders what they feel their requirements are, or what they would like the network to provide the customer, so that whenever we go in with our submission, we're really going in on the backdrop of what the customer wants from the network. What do they want? Security? Do they want safety? Do they want reliability? What level of service do they want from it? So we're going through a formal process of a stakeholder engagement with all parties that would have an interest, in the hope that develops our understanding of what the customer needs and develops our proposed investment for the RP6 period.
What percentages of Northern Ireland businesses would be connected to the grid?
What percentage?
The vast majority.
When you say to the grid, well, I don't. With the grid, are you talking about the transmission system or the distribution system?
Distribution system.
It's very.
Are you looking for, do you mean the number of commercial customers?
Yes.
Number of commercial customers. There's 840 customers in total.
Yeah, but 60,000, business and commercial customers.
And, yeah, that's.
And what percentage is that?
There's about 850,000 customers in total connected to the grid.
Right.
So basically, every business customer who's got a connection to the grid and has an electricity supply is a customer of NIE's. So that total of 60,000 is effectively all businesses that are connected onto the electricity network.
If you don't mind, sorry, the question just in terms of the general connections. Once a customer gets into a general connection, there will be a planner assigned to that customer who will maintain a relationship with the customer up until the job is connected. Now, with conventional load-related connections, that process normally works quite well. When it comes to generation connections, which has become more problematic for us recently, the work we've done around communication there has had to be more widespread. We've engaged with a number of industry forums and certain groups to promote and present the situation with connections, and also putting more information, for example, on the website, the heat map. There's a network mapping tool now that we have available that the developers can actually go in and self-assess whether they're likely to be able to proceed with the connection or otherwise. So there's a considerable balance of effort now being placed into communicating generally with the generation connection related part of the jigsaw.
Can I ask, I understand at the moment there's about 20% of the is renewable. Is that right?
Yes, 20% of consumption of energy is coming from renewable sources. That's right.
What would be the target?
Well, at the minute, the government has an official target of 40% to come from renewables by 2020, and in terms of a level of certainty around that, there will certainly be very important ongoing discussion about that target over the short term. However, the plans we have in place at the minute will certainly allow us to get to around 27% by the end of 2016. Beyond that, there's more uncertainty as to whether some of the very large investments that are required would be made to allow us to move up towards the bigger targets.
And this ties in with the recent consultation that's been issued by DETI, just around the target and plans for renewables for the coming years.
By the end of 2016, you hope to uplift that to 27%?
That's the plan, and I think that date is also important because, as things stand, the incentive regimes that are in place for both large-scale developers and small-scale developers have a level of certainty up until March 2017, but there's a level of uncertainty then as to what happens.
I was just going to finish by asking you, if you don't mind,
Sorry.
if that incentivisation would be removed, what impact would that have?
Well, the incentives to me would be, the sole reason why much of this is happening at the minute. So if the incentives were to disappear completely and the renewable sector was only to get rewarded at the same rate for energy as any other source of conventional energy, it would have a dramatic impact on the amount of take-up of generation.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Do you have a figure of the percentage of electricity generated that comes from renewables as opposed to consumed?
Well, I mean, the figures will be not totally dissimilar. The measure we use is Sony, who's the network operator, maintains a sort of record of what they call the energy that's sent out from various sources of generation. They make certain assumptions about how much energy is sort of lost as it finds its way through the network. There's inherent losses in a network anyway, and they then estimate how much is actually being consumed by end users from that generation. So it's a similar sort of calculation.
Okay, so there's no big differences in the amount that's generated and then the needs of consumers that's used?
There will always be a natural level of losses in an electricity network, so the amount that's sent out will always be a bit higher than what's actually consumed, but the difference is roughly 6 or 7% between those two figures.
Paul?
Thank you. This is a massive problem for which NIE is a part player. I understand that. It's not all in your own destiny. There's a lot of players around this. But you do play a part in the problem. And to a certain degree, you are the problem. Everybody says, including yourself, that investment is needed to connect people to the grid. Why are you not investing more, as per the price control from the Competition Commission?
Are you referring to connection of generation or a connection of demand?
By investing in the grid.
Well, Paul, I mean, I suppose, without, again, trying to make it more complicated, the investments required to support generation are of a very different type. Essentially, to support generation, there's a reverse engineering of the network. The network needs to be strengthened in a way which is very different from what happens for conventional load-related generation. The work that we had done as part of the last price review to try and get more monies made available was partly successful in that we did get certain level of funding released to support small-scale generation in particular. That released, as I was saying, the introduction of about 100 projects or so, but unfortunately the Competition Commission did conclude that further investment in the area to support small-scale generation was not in the public interest, and that's clearly documented in there. So we're battling against that position. We're also in parallel putting forward further proposals to the utility regulator at the minute that would potentially release significant further volumes of projects. But there is an issue around funding, as well as purely the logistics of developing a network. It's not just all about money. The logistics of trying to strengthen a distribution network, the timelines involved, the wayleaving, the securing of consents to do it, even if you had an infinite amount of money, is a significant issue as well.
I'm a realist, so I realise that you do not want to send a distribution network to every cliff and every nook and cranny of Northern Ireland, and I completely appreciate that there has to be a strategic investment outlook in all of this. And I'll come back to the statement by the Competition Commission after this question. But you were given by the Competition Commission from April 2012 to 13, I think the value was 58 million. And then from April 2013 to 14, you were given 67 million for those 2 years. That was out of a grand total of capital expenditure allowance of 458 million. How much of that 58 million and 67 million have you spent?
Well, there's a couple of things, Paul, just behind that question. The first thing to say is that the Competition Commission didn't reach its conclusions until about this time last year. So it was about 2 years into the price control period.
Yep.
So the policy that was adopted, and a prudent policy by NIE, was to keep the run rate for investment similar to the RP4 run rate. So we couldn't overcommit investment in the first 2 years with basically regulatory uncertainty about how much money we were actually going to get from the Competition Commission.
Yeah.
So over the course of the last year, since we've had clarity from the Competition Commission, we have been out to tender for this big ramp-up of work that we're going to have for the balance of the period up to September 2017. And in the document that we submitted, we talked about the amount of money that we'd be spending on replacing transmission and distribution assets, that there will be a total of £217 million spent, and that is in 09-10 money. And we plan to deliver the outputs and all the outputs that were defined in the Competition Commission final determination during the course of that price review. The nature of where we've come from with the Competition Commission process is that that investment is going to be towards the back end of the period of the price review, but we fully expect to complete the investment that's defined in the Competition Commission documents during the course of the price review. It's just the nature of it, it's going to be back-ended.
You can roll over the money that was allowed for 2012 to 2013, that can be rolled over, that 58 million?
Yeah, it's just a timing, so there's a bit of an underspend the first 3 years, but there'll be an overspend in the last 2.5 years.
Well, and it's just to maybe make one last point related to that, is it's important to say as well that 90% of the work that we do when it comes to that type of work it's asset replacement work because of the age of the network. And going back to the point that Ian would have made earlier, I think it's something in the region of 23 million is going to be spent during the course of this price control on load growth related work on the distribution network. So it is a smaller part of this. It's mainly driven, this work is on asset replacement work because of the age of the network.
Are you committing to, can you give this committee a commitment that the 458 million that was capital expenditure allowed within the Competition Commission statement will be spent and invested in the grid?
Well, the intention is to deliver all the outputs in the RP5 period. For the first 2 years we were overspent versus our allowances by approximately 7 million. We expect that to balance out over the 5-year period.
It's also important to say that the nature of regulation is that there's an incentive for us to try to do that work as efficiently as possible. So to spend less of the money and to still deliver the outputs, and that money then is shared back with customers effectively. So there could be an underspend on that by potentially, but still deliver the work, and our commitment is to deliver the work programme, and that's what's defined in the Competition Commission.
That would most certainly be in your interest, because it's my understanding that whatever underspend there is out of that 458 million, you get to keep 50% of it. Is that correct?
There is a sharing of the benefit with customers, and that's the nature for any regulated contract. What we're planning to do, as Peter says, we're actually overspent in the first 2 years, not underspent. So our commitment is around delivering the work programme for the network.
So it wouldn't be in your best interest to underspend?
Well, it's in our interest to deliver the work programme as effectively as possible. I mean, if we can do that and potentially save money, that, of course, that's what we'll be trying to do. But ultimately, what our objective here is to deliver the work programme that is defined in our regulatory contract.
Yeah. In a statement issued by NIE on the 15th of August 2014, you stated that you had to withdraw conditional connection offers. You did say that the Competition Commission had decided that levying further costs of 33 kV investment on the general consumer base to support small-scale renewable generation was not in the public interest. That is a misrepresentation of the Competition Commission.
I don't believe it is, but
well,
I'm not sure why you would conclude that.
Well, in paragraphs 10.303 and 10.319 of its report, the Competition Commission actually said that it was not in the public interest to increase NIE's allowance of 30 million for this work because NIE have not justified the cost.
No, it
They
doesn't
did
say-
not.
it
They
doesn't-
did not
I'm
state.
reading it, it doesn't say that.
They
actually.
did not
It doesn't
state.
refer to 30 million then.
They did not state that the investment in the 33 kV network should not happen. It should happen, and NIE should strategically invest in the 33 kV grid to allow people and businesses to connect.
Yeah. The only allowance that was made for 33 kV investment to support renewables was the 2.3 million. It wasn't 30 million.
So are you saying that because the Competition Commission didn't give NIE additional investment or monies to invest in the 33 kV, the 33 kV will not be invested upon?
Well, the 33 kV will continue to be invested on as is required to support development of load-related work.
And who takes that burden?
Well, that's part of
That forms the projects that which were identified at the start of RP5 and where we would see through the period requires investment to meet our licence and statutory obligations to ensure security of the supply and quality of supply. So on the back of us doing work in certain areas to enhance the capacity of the 33 network, it does obviously have a knock-on effect and increases the capacity of the 33 network generation in the same area.
Which you can't then burden the consumer with?
We're not. We're doing it. The driver for it is the load-related investment, which is allowed for within the regulatory allowance. The knock-on effect is it meets your load development, but it also, in the same area, may well release capacity for generators.
Yeah.
But it's not specifically funding to create capacity for small-scale generation. It's funding to create capacity for the load development, increased load, which also then benefits the secondary.
If you can give a quote and time-bound it, why can you not release? I know you do the heat map, which is a map basically with red splotches and increasingly red splotches and circles. Why can you not produce a grid or a chart or even release information per substation when requested? You have 230 primary substations on the distribution network. Why can that not be produced or released and time-bounded? Because I know there is an issue. You said at first it was commercially sensitive. It may be just the fact that it's time-sensitive. Why can you not put a disclaimer on that information and release it to the business?
It's not commercially sensitive from our point of view, Paul. It's the number of applicants who are waiting to get connection, who are in the queue. We do have an obligation to look at the data protection issues surrounding those applicants. So when we look at capacity at a substation, for example, if we were to simply tell you now how much capacity there is today at that substation, that would be totally misleading in terms of whether or not it's going to help you to get a connection, because there could be a number of people in a queue waiting to get offered a connection who've got right of access in advance of yourself. And unless you were given a full picture, which released information about people who are maybe haven't even got offers but are just at the application stage awaiting an offer, the information would not be in the least helpful to you. Apart from the fact that our distribution codes, which are approved by the regulator, do not allow us to release information on preliminary planning data, which is effectively people who are in the application process but have not yet agreed to a connection. So there's a couple of factors that make it impossible at the minute for us to release that information. Now, as the work continues that we're doing with managed connections, for example, and we try to look at what's happening in GB, we feel certainly that we will try to release more helpful information over the coming months as best we can, but without running in the face of some of those obligations in the distribution code, for example. But although you're saying, there's the heat map has got red dots and red splodges, it is proving to be helpful to some extent to applicants at the minute. And certainly, if by using what we call that network mapping tool, an applicant can get in and using his postcode can get a reasonably good idea where he fits into the system. If he's got a wee bit of design knowledge, he can get a good idea as to whether he's close to a busy-looking primary substation or whether there's still a bit of room left in it.
But the only help that will create is whether he applies for a generator or not.
Yeah.
And again, that's not very helpful when you're looking to grow the economy and hoping to entice business through lower rates of corporation tax. We have an area east of Ballymena that is served by a substation that customers and consumers have been told they cannot connect through new means of generation for themselves. Their bills are very expensive. They need to generate their own electricity to keep their overheads down, and yet they're being denied by NIE for a connection grid.
Well,
a connection.
And I won't deal specifically with that substation as to whether it's included or not, but what we have done now, having had some success, some significant success in terms of the work that was agreed with the regulator at 40 primary substations, we've now identified another 28 substations which are reaching that level of congestion. The amounts of money involved in releasing capacity at those primary substations are of lower order, similar to the sort of monies that were previously approved. And we're working hard now with the regulator to see could we get that another step of alliance agreed in those areas to free up potentially another 25 or 30 megawatts of projects. So it is not impossible that would not be addressed and maybe deal with the situation you're referring to in the relatively short term, but we still have not concluded an agreement with the regulator. And in addition to that work, which is more what we would call conventional investment to release firm headroom on the network, we've done a lot of work now to decide or to consider whether an alternative form of connection where the parties prepared to accept some form of output reduction at times of peak stress would work. That's still going to take us a few months to bottom out, but that's a real potential solution here as well.
On any substation, when you talk about, I understand exactly the concept of the headroom capacity, and then also the fact of generators pushing electricity back up the grid instead of sucking it out. But if you have a problem in any given substation whereby you can't allow more generation, what does that look like for sucking electricity out of that substation? What happens if...
It could be absolutely fine. You know, you could still utilise the same main transformers at the substation to pull more energy out. But what has typically happened historically is the transformers at those substations were not set up to deal with the flow going in the opposite direction. What we found is in certain areas with relatively low order investments, changing some of the control gear at the transformers, it does allow them to absorb some.
Yeah, but the heat map then will only allow established businesses to find out if they can generate electricity. It won't help new businesses who are coming in to, say, build a large plant or manufacturing plant.
I'd have to be clear there that the heat map, to be honest, is exclusively really trying to deal with the issues associated with generation coming onto the network. So, and if we're creating confusion there, we need to be careful.
Yeah.
Because it is not designed really as a hotspot.
But what tool can a new company from America or France, what tool can they use if they decide to set up base east of Ballymena, where they know or they consider there being a problem for generation? How can you entice? How can I, as a representative for that area, entice a company to come to that area if there's a problem in the substation?
I think the demand side, Ian,
if it's a purely demand customer, well, we would treat that differently. There's two number of ways it can be dealt with, I suppose. One is if it's new investment coming in. Generally, InvestNI are involved in attracting the new investment. As I mentioned before, we work closely with InvestNI to develop these business parks where there's capacity created. So effectively what InvestNI would do would ask us to create a new substation or a network to that site, develop the network around the site so that any investment coming in, they just come in, they get the site, and they just pay for the local connection onto the cable running outside the street. Then the infrastructure ready built in for them. And InvestNI, based that, we work closely with them, and based on the acreage, we would create the capacity. I think it's about 100 kilowatts per acre we would build into the capacity there. So they would come to us and identify a particular site. We would build in the infrastructure for that level of capacity. InvestNI will track the business and know that in that site they will be able to connect a particular customer.
Who pays for that investment?
InvestNI.
So what burden is on NIE to invest, or what?
Well, there's no burden on NIE to invest there because we wouldn't have seen that because there's no there's no substation there, no infrastructure there to protect the growth rate. We don't see any growth there. This is for a one-off load coming in to attract investment. NIE, as I said earlier, will invest for underlying growth rate, but we can't predict where new customers are going to come in. What we can do is work with Invest NI to develop the infrastructure and create the capacity at particular sites, designated sites, to allow them to.
But surely if you have a problem with a substation already existing, and you know that you're talking about an area which is one of the most highly populated manufacturing areas in the province, surely you would have invested beforehand or invest now immediately if you thought and considered there being a problem.
Well, as I mentioned there, if you take particular substations, we will review those substations, the load and the capacity in those substations on an annual basis and look at the utilisation of those particular sites, and we try and forecast that forward. And sites that are becoming close to their headroom of the maximum capacity and are showing a continual growth rate that they will become overloaded. We will if it's a transformer, 5 MVA transformer, we will plan to upgrade that to the next level of transformer, which will be a 10 MVA. So that if the load continues to grow, then there's capacity for that load to continue to grow. Now, if a customer comes in during that time, after we've put the larger transformer in, and wants 2 or 3 megawatts of capacity, it'll probably be available to them. But if a customer comes in and wants 9 or 10 megawatts of capacity, it's not going to be available. And as I mentioned earlier, we cannot be investing in infrastructure, speculative investment into 15, 20 kVA capacities at every point in the province, because the cost of that infrastructure would be prohibitive. It would be passed on to the customers, and you would end up with this stranded investment in the majority of places across the province. So it's much better that through the likes of Invest NI, that investment can be targeted to areas where the industry can be attracted to through government into those power parks or business parks or whatever, and the capacity is created there. For customers, existing customers that are connected to the network which aren't involved in those power parks, if they're wanting to go, they make an application to NIE, we can look at the load on their system, the load on the transformer feeding them, or the supply feeding them. We know if there's other customers that have applications in that area, so we know where they sit in the queue and what is available to them, and whether we can meet their demand, or through discussion say, look, if you can reduce it, we can connect. And we work with them on that. And that's on an individual basis, and they then either can get in within the headroom that's there, or if it's a substantial increase, as the likes of, we mentioned, the Dunman, which is really well outside any reasonable level of headroom, then is a decision, here's the work that needs to be done, is a decision who pays for it.
Okay, I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Paul, you're looking in, but we're in danger of losing quorum here. Are you in a panic or happy enough?
No, I'll not let the meeting go quartered.
You questions, or are you happy enough?
I have questions, yeah.
Go on ahead.
Great, thank you, Chair.
So Gordon's looking to get out too.
I know, well, if the other parties were
No,
here...
there's strong representation here from the DUP, I'll give it this.
They're all trying to fight elections. You know,
I think it's lunchtime.
we're fighting our elections too, but we'll have to do our job when we're here as well. You mentioned, Michael, at the start, 20%. There was a comparison with GB, and I just wanted to nail down what exactly was it that you were comparing with Northern Ireland and the rest of GB when you mentioned the 20% figure?
Well, the 20% figure is really a factual figure in terms of the amount of energy being consumed, which is generated from renewables in Northern Ireland. When I was mentioning the comparison with GB, I was saying that Northern NIE, which is the network operator in GB, if we compare ourselves to the amount of generation that's been connected in other network operators in the mainland, Western Power, Scottish Power, Electricity Northwest, when we compare the amount of generation being connected compared to the number of customers in those territories, we're clearly ahead in terms of the amount of generation per customer in those locations. So in relative terms, the amount that's been connected here through renewable sources is very, very high, and particularly in the small-scale generation, because there's relatively high incentives in Northern Ireland, which are driving a lot of the, naturally, as you would expect when there's strong incentives in Northern Ireland.
Okay, thank you. Anaerobic digesters, one company that I'm aware of, 10 sites, £30 million worth of investment on the part of the company. 8 of those 10 projects NIE have delayed, and they've been planning with your organisation in terms of when it's going to come on stream, and 8 out of 10 of them NIE have come in to say we're not going to be able to have this work done on time. What are the processes whenever you get engaged in these projects so that it's coming on stream according to the time frames that the companies are planning to then deliver? Because in these projects you then have consequences further upstream in the supply chain, with farmers being involved in sowing out their land, and then they're told, well, actually we're not going to be able to take your product, and there's financial penalties for them. So I'd be keen to try and just tease out how you can ensure the project that you are delivering, which is at full cost recovery for the customer, that actually it's done on time. Because 8 out of 10 delays in this particular company, to me, doesn't seem like the type of service that I suspect you wouldn't be content with.
Sure. Well, if we look at the sequence of events just briefly, the applicant goes through a process and gets their offer within 90 days. We've had various discussions about whether that could be shorter or not, but in balance, we think getting the offer issued within 90 days is reasonable, and we'll probably stick to that. The real challenges emerge once the applicant decides, right, I'm going ahead here, and they've got a significant project. Because we've more recently got to the point where significant levels of reinforcement are required on the local network to be able to connect that party, it means that for us to process the consenting work, to get the wayleaves, the legalities, we're having to deal with a multitude of landowners, which would not have been the case maybe a couple of years ago when the network itself was at a less saturated level. That means, for example, if it's not just a matter of connecting the AD plant to the immediate 3-phase line, but some work needs to be done between that connection point and the primary substation, which is maybe several kilometres away, there's a lot of landowner involved. And what is absolutely holding these projects up at the minute is the level of consenting that's required, the multitude of landowners, and unfortunately in many cases an increasing resistance with landowners to grant consents, particularly where there's parties maybe who are affected who aren't getting a connection offer at all because they're sniggered at the particular substation they're going to. Now really, from our point of view, when you get through that consenting process, which can take a significant part of time, and it can, there's the planning permission itself as well as finalising all the legalities, that is taking longer than we would like. Absolutely would agree with you there. There's a limit to what we can do. What we are doing is strengthening particularly the wayleavers, which is the resource that we use to gain the consents. So we're going to be introducing significant increases of resource in that area. It doesn't bring an absolute guarantee that we'll get the consents done any quicker, because if landowners refuse completely, then we get into compulsory wayleaves, into a DETI process, which is going to take 18 months or a couple of years just to sort out a particular issue. So there is a difficult tension to balance there. When it gets to the stage where the planning approval is in place and the consenting has been agreed, the construction stage of the project is typically 8 to 10 weeks maximum. It's the bit in the middle, what we call the pre-construction, that is proving very problematic. And as I say, I think the best we can do is to try to communicate the situation as best we can with developers, push as hard as we can on the consenting arrangements and the resources we have there, but there's ultimately some limit to what we've done.
When in that process does the red flag appear in the system? The developer saying, listen, I've committed to people supplying me with all of their product. I'd been told it would be at this particular date. I know in one particular project it's 6 months is the delay that's going to be hitting this individual, and there are other farmers who are supplying into him who all now aren't going to be able to. In this particular project, they were going to have a cut in May, and now that's not going to happen. So they're left with financial penalties. So when is it flagging up here's a particular project that's going to have a particular economic consequence for a number of individuals, not least the individual behind the scheme, but all of the other supply chain. We need to prioritise resources to try and resolve these projects.
Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there is only so much prioritising of resource that will help a situation like that. And in cases where maybe a developer has a number of plants running with us, we would be giving that developer an update, probably through a spreadsheet process on a pretty regular basis where his projects were, and if one had got stuck particularly in way leaves, that would be flagged to him. When it's an individual developer, the relationship he has with the particular planner who's dealing with this project is really the one where we need to highlight through that communication if the job isn't going as quickly as we would like. However, to sit and say, you know, we can give you a guarantee that we could eliminate 6 months delays would be unrealistic for me to say that, because the alternative of a compulsory way leave is so much further down the track that we really, all we can do is try and do our best to push through the consents in the more conventional way that we do at the minute with our way leavers. I would accept that, particularly in one-off individual cases, it's trying to keep the communication channels as open as we can during that process does present a challenge simply with the volume of jobs that we're doing at the minute. But I think in most cases the developers are fairly well aware of where their project sits. You know, if there's individual cases that they're not, we can address those.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. That's it for the day. Are you happy enough to follow up on any written questions that we may have following the briefing?
Yes.
All right, well, thanks for your presentation today. It's been very helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Don't bother voting for any of the rest of these parties and just weren't interested.
We didn't come here for party politics. No.
Nicely done.
Members, we move on to agenda item number 7, matters arising. There are 10 items listed on the index, which is at page 62 of your packs, and papers are from pages 63 to 214. At page 63 is a departmental response to the committee's queries in respect of the research agenda for 2014-15. Are members content to note?
Agreed.
At page 77 is a response to a query by the committee in respect of the Moyle Interconnector. Are members content to note?
Agreed.
Page 70.
Sorry, no, on that Moyle Interconnector, Chair, they tell us everything except cost and how that cost will be whittled down, I suspect, to the customer. And I think we should try and get more information about the actual level of cost and who will burden that cost.
Members happy enough?
Agreed.
Page 78 is correspondence from Teresa Villiers in response to the committee's letter of the 25th of February with regards to the corporation tax bill. Members content to note?
Agreed.
Page 80 is a chart provided by Tourism Ireland which details their visitor and revenue forecast for 2014 and their visitor and revenue targets for 2015 as was requested by the committee. Tourism Ireland also provided the committee with a copy of its presentation as well as a copy of a research paper on visitors from China, and members will have received both of these papers in their members' info packs. Members content to note?
Agreed.
Page 81 is a list of the issues and any associated papers which members had previously suggested raising with the utility regulator.
Yeah, Chair.
We're due to brief the committee on the 28th of April.
Sorry, Chair, can I add also to that, I think we talked about it last week, and that was the ICEM.
Yeah.
When it comes in, and the actual design of the ICEM. I would have concerns about the transparency and also the capacity stuff.
So you're looking to add something else on?
Yes, we are. I am.
For everything you want to add on, we have to take 3 things off.
Okay, well, that's how we look then. But I do think that when you have in there design of the NICEP, which is very important, it's not as important as the ICEM, because the ICEM is going to be the actual system that all of our customers are burdened to and handcuffed to over the next decade or so. So I think the ICEM is vitally important, especially when it is when we talk to the utility regulator.
So you want to add the ICEM on?
Yes, please. Yeah, it's a
we ask
massive
members
issue.
to consider that now and next week and come back with any thoughts on how we can deal with the list. Have enough?
Yeah.
Page 202 to 204 is correspondence relating to the group Protect Our North Coast. The group had a query on one point within the research paper commissioned by the committee, and the response from Assembly Research is included in the correspondence. Tabled today is a response from the department detailing its views on the issues raised by the group, which is at page 5 of tabled papers. Are members content for the clerk to write to the group explaining the position in relation to their query on the research paper and also forward the response from the department for their information?
Agreed.
Tabled today is a response from Invest NI in relation to its decision not to bid for any land at the site of the former St Patrick's Barracks, and this is at page 11 of the tabled paper.
Great.
Members content to note?
Yeah.
I have no interest in that.
Well, I haven't read it, Chair, so could I ask that this may well defer it to next week, if that would be okay?
Have enough?
Yeah, great.
The committee has received copies of the Insolvency Service annual report and account for the year ended 31st of March 2014. Any member who wishes to view a copy should contact the committee office. The remaining items on the index, are members content with the suggested actions for the remaining items on the index?
Great.
Agenda item number 8, there's written submissions on the inquiry. Beginning at page 206 of your members' packs is a list of further written submissions received. These include Belfast City Council and Mid and East Antrim Councils. Members content to include the submissions in the evidence for the inquiry?
Great.
Are members content for all inquiry submissions to be listed on the committee's webpage?
Great, yeah.
I want to remind members that a stakeholder event for the inquiry will begin at 2 p.m. in the Long Gallery, and table today is a presentation. This is at page 13 of your table papers. Are members content for the clerk to deliver the presentation at the event?
Great.
Yeah.
Agenda item number 9. Oh, sorry, Jim. Jim's also drafted a press release. Is that in table papers? Or it's going around now.
Right.
Going around now.
Yeah.
Patty made a couple of suggestions. And I can't read Jim or Patsy's handwriting.
Sorry, the chair has suggested in 1, 2, 3, the fourth paragraph to refer to a more integrated approach to economic development. And then also she pointed out that Tourism NI is listed as an industry representative, so to suggest changing that to industry and government representatives.
No problem.
Have enough?
Great.
From agenda item number 9, subordinate legislation SR 2015-159, the Insolvency Order 2005. Included in your papers is a cover note at page 249 and explanatory memorandum and draft SR page 250. This rule is subject to negative resolution. The committee discussed this rule at SL1 stage at its meeting on the 21st of October and had no comment. The rule will come into operation on the 21st of April. The examiner of statutory rules has no points to raise with regards to technical scrutiny. Are members content with the statutory rule?
Great.
So the Committee for Enterprise, Trade and Investment has considered SR 2015-159, the Insolvency Order 2005, and has no objection to the rule.
Agreed.
Agenda item number 10, subordinate legislation SR 2015-000. Right, no? Good. Right, SR 2015-000 Energy Amendment Order. Included in your papers are a cover note at page 270 and an explanatory memorandum on the draft SR page 272. This rule is subject to affirmative resolution, and the committee discussed this rule at SL1 stages meeting on the 24th of March and had no comment, and the rule will come into operation in accordance with Article 1.1. The examiner of statutory rules has indicated that he is extremely unlikely to raise any points of technical scrutiny. However, he has stated that he raised a small query with the department on a reference in the draft SR, as it seemed that in both cases a reference to paragraph 2 might perhaps have been a reference to paragraph 3, but little, if anything, actually seems to turn on the point. Are members content with the SR?
Great.
What am I doing here? What's such a change?
Please that it be affirmed.
Opposed to what?
There's no objection.
Right. So the Committee for Enterprise, Trade and Investment has considered SR 2015-000, the Energy Amendment Order, and has no objection to the rule, and it be
agrees that it be affirmed.
And agrees that it be affirmed by the Assembly. Have enough?
Yep.
Agenda item number 11. The written briefing from DETI on the Contract for Difference scheme, the Strategic Issues discussion paper. Papers for this item include correspondence from the Minister at page 280 and the discussion paper at page 2 at 1. Members content to note?
Great.
Agenda item number 12. There's a written briefing from DETI on the Government's response to the consultation on adjustments to sustainability and reporting provisions for biomass. Departmental paper is at page 301. Are members content to note?
Great.
Agenda item number 13 is a written briefing from DETI on the Horizon 2020 progress update.
Great.
That's at page 310 of members' packs. I'm supposed to update is on a recent event, but sure I wasn't at it. Patsy's at it. So I don't want to miss out on that update, unfortunately. Agenda item.
I was at it. It was very good.
Well, you were at it, Gordon. You want to give an update? Agenda item 14, correspondence.
Very informative.
There are 5 items of correspondence listed in the index, which is at page 326. At page 327 is correspondence from NERTA in respect of a joint meeting with the committee and the Oireachtas Joint Committee on Job and Enterprise and Innovation. Are members content for the clerk to liaise with the clerk to the joint committee to organise the meeting?
Great.
Members content to note the remaining items in the index?
Great.
Agenda item number 15, the forward work programme. And this includes a copy of the committee's draft forward work programme for the next term at page 342. Are members content with the forward work programme?
Agreed, yeah.
Agenda item 16. Any other business? Any other additional items of business? No. Agenda item 17. Date, time and place of the next meeting will be on Tuesday the 21st of April in room 29 at 10 a.m. And once again, I remind members that the stakeholder event for the inquiry begins at 2 p.m. in the Long Gallery. Agreed?
Agreed.
Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room